Chapter 1528 Hidden Hand. Ling Han increased his speed. Half a day passed, and he finally managed to stuff all of the 100,000 true origin stones into Shi Gongyang's belly. Right now, Shi Gongyang was completely unable to close his mouth. Meanwhile, his belly was so large that it was enough to astound anyone who saw it. The outlines of the true origin stones could be clearly seen on his belly, and it would cause one to question whether or not his belly was about to explode. However, Eternal River Tier elites would have definitely cultivated their physique before. It was just a matter of how much they had done so. In any case, their bellies wouldn't be forced to the point of bursting so easily. Ling Han clapped his hands, extremely satisfied with his own work. Shi Gongyang's appearance was extremely comical right now, with his gigantic belly completely disproportionate to his seemingly small limbs and head. Ling Han then proceeded to take all of Shi Gongyang's spatial spirit tools. However, his expression instantly darkened. There were only a mere 17 pieces of level 14 godly metals inside these spatial spirit tools, and the rest of the items were all true origin stones. There were several 100 million true origin stones in total. However, this was nothing compared to the godly metal that he had given Lin Yuqi. "You're truly seeking death." Ling Han raised his fists and dealt another vicious beating to Shi Gongyang. When he was satisfied, he tossed Shi Gongyang aside and said, "I'll give you 3 days' time to gather everything that belongs to me. If you can't satisfy me," he pondered for a moment before continuing, "I'll find 100 boars to backdoor you." He strode away after issuing this threat. Shi Gongyang shuddered upon hearing this. He wanted to immediately leave this dangerous place. However, his cultivation had been suppressed, so how could he escape? Ling Han had only just left the Treasure Forest Pavilion when he heard a sweet voice say, "Oh, isn't this little brother Han? Lin Yuqi." Ling Han wore a cold expression as he turned around, and he said, "You still dare to show yourself?" "Why wouldn't I dare? You're not a man-eating tiger, are you? Should I be afraid of you eating me?" Lin Yuqi swayed her hips as she walked over, accentuating the curves of her shapely body. The passers-by couldn't help but pinch their noses, afraid that they would get a nosebleed. She tossed a spatial ring toward Ling Han as she said, "If I didn't show myself, how would you get your belongings back?" Ling Han caught the spatial ring and inspected it with his divine sense. There was a huge amount of godly metal within it, ranging from level 11 to level 13. There were countless godly metals of each level. There was an aggrieved look on Lin Yuqi's face, and she said, "I've been working hard for you this entire time. However, that bastard arrived half a year ago and forcefully took over my position. I'd kept a hidden hand, though, and it was because of this that I managed to retain most of your belongings. Moreover, most of the level 14 godly metal is still with me." Ling Han's anger subsided upon receiving his godly metal, and he asked, "What on earth happened?" "That bastard is interested in me, and he came to this branch using the excuse of performing an inspection. However, he became greedy upon seeing me selling a piece of godly metal every few days, so he forcefully took over my position," Lin Yuqi explained. "Fortunately, I was able to install a few workers who are loyal to me. They would immediately notify me whenever you arrived." Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then pondered for a moment before walking back to the Treasure Forest Pavilion. "Hey, what are you doing?" Lin Yuqi hurriedly ran over to block him. "I came here to meet you so I could avoid that bastard. Are you going to walk straight back into his trap?" She naturally didn't know that Ling Han was already powerful enough to easily suppress Shi Gongyang. Thus, she was afraid that Ling Han would go and recklessly argue with Shi Gongyang. Doing so would be like a sheep walking into the mouth of a tiger. Ling Han didn't reply, and he continued to stride toward the pharmacy. How could Lin Yuqi block him? Thus, she had no option but to follow behind him. She would convince Shi Gongyang to let him off no matter what. She was cultivating with 10 bodies after all, so it was only natural that her cultivation speed was incredible. After receiving the inheritance of the 3 Phoenix Kings, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden's cultivation also started to advance rapidly. The benefits that she received wouldn't be immediately evident. However, she would see her cultivation speed increase by 10,000-fold before advancing to the Genesis tier. Thus, she had managed to advance to the medium extreme of the Heavenly Body tier and then the high extreme not long after. Moreover, all of this was just in a few months' time. Meanwhile, The Rain Emperor and the Notionless Saint had also advanced to the Eternal River tier, thanks to the help of some saintly medicine. However, Su Ran was still unable to advance no matter what. His amount of talent was the only thing that was holding him back. Pang! One day, the tranquility of Ling Han's life was finally broken. The gate of his courtyard was kicked open, revealing 3 unwelcome guests. The Saint Missus was personally visiting Ling Han to deal with him, and she was even bringing her son along with her. She and Kai Miao had instantly reached an agreement to barge over together. Even if the sky fell, wasn't the Saint Missus here to hold it up for him? Ling Han shook his head and said, "My respect for saints lies in my heart. I don't need to act it out for others to see." Pathetic sophism. Kai Miao said with a cold humph. "Are you going to kneel or not?" It was Ling Han's refusal to crawl through the dog flap that had sparked all of this conflict in the first place. However, even the Saint Missus and the son of the great saint were present now. Could Ling Han still persist with his stubbornness? Ling Han simply looked over to the young man. He was none other than the son and only child of the Star Sand Saint. At that time, he had still been a bratty child who cried for everyone to become his horsey. In fact, he had even been frightened by Ling Han. A dozen or so years had passed, and the bratty child of the past had already grown up to become a handsome and energetic young man. He smiled and said, "Young man you are?" A bashful smile appeared on the youth's face, and he replied, "I'm Mi Xueming." "So the Star Sand Saint's surname is Mi." Ling Han involuntarily chuckled upon seeing his reaction. Back then, this Mi Xueming had been a bratty child who had even used a heavenly body tier cultivator as his horse. Upon seeing the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, he had even insisted on having her become his wife. Yet, he was acting all shy and bashful now. It was very likely that the Star Sand Saint had taught him well. Descendants of genuinely powerful clans were indeed proud, but this pride was usually hidden within their mind. From the outside, they would appear especially cordial and easygoing. Ling Han, Zhu Xiuer and Kai Miao roared in unison. He was acting far too arrogant. He had actually ignored both of them. "Detain him." Zhu Xiuer was finally unable to contain her fury any longer. Ling Han had acted in an identical manner back then, completely ignoring her words. In her eyes, all she wanted was some face. Was it that difficult for him to lower his head toward her? Kai Miao sneered coldly. With the Saint Missus present, who would dare to obstruct him? Ren Feiyun wouldn't dare, and the Tranquil Heart Saint would most likely also turn a blind eye. After all, he wouldn't dare to challenge the actions of the Saint Missus, would he? Xiao. A fragrant scent breezed over as Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden appeared beside Ling Han. The Empress peered down at Zhu Xiuer. She was an incredibly proud individual, and she couldn't care less about Zhu Xiuer being the Saint Missus or whatnot. Anyone who dared to disrespect her husband was as good as provoking her might. Moreover, her fury was enough to make wind and clouds lose color. Gasp! Zhu Xiuer couldn't help but widen her eyes in astonishment upon seeing the Empress. In fact, even her breathing stopped for a second. How could there be such a beautiful woman in the world? From her appearance to her physique, and also to her demeanor, every single aspect of her being was indescribably perfect. How audacious! The Empress roared as she rose 3 meters into the air. She pointed down at Zhu Xiuer and the others and said, "You dare to disrespect my husband? Have you people become tired of living?" Zhu Xiuer finally regained her senses upon hearing this, and rage instantly spread across her face. This B*TCH actually dared to scold her. Moreover, she had purposefully risen 3 meters into the air. Just how much contempt did she hold for them? She also hovered into the air, rising 3 meters above Empress Luan Xing. "Are you not going to kneel and greet the Saint Missus?" Ling Han smiled before pulling the Empress down and into his embrace. There's no need to argue with this type of person. It's not worthwhile. Amen. The Empress smiled sweetly as she replied with a gentle nod. Fuck. Kai Miao's eyes were red with jealousy. Even though he viewed himself as a supreme prodigy, and even though he only had cultivation on his mind, his heart still swayed when he saw the stunningly beautiful Empress. In fact, he could barely control himself. However, Such a beautiful and noble celestial maiden was actually acting all sweet and gentle as she rested in Ling Han's embrace? The sight of this was like having knives plunged into his heart. Humph! You've disrespected the traditions, and you've even dared to talk back to the Saint Missus. Obediently bow down and accept your crimes. Kai Miao finally lashed out at Ling Han. You dare! The Empress' gaze became sharp, and she immediately leaped forward to block Kai Miao's attack. Boom! A devastating aura burst into the surroundings. This was the unique and overwhelming might of her divine fetus. Its effects were similar to Ling Han's heaven's might in that it could prevent others from unleashing their full power. Such was the Empress' power that even the big shots wouldn't dare to underestimate her. Kai Miao didn't want to battle against the Empress, yet she left him with no option but to do so. He immediately altered his attack to grab at her. In any case, this presented a good opportunity for him. If he wanted to conquer this noble and proud woman, the first step would be to shatter her pride. How would he shatter it? With strength, of course. The Empress smiled balefully as a brick appeared in her hands. Chapter 1530 Sudden Arrival of a Sane. An intense battle broke out between the Empress and Kai Miao, and this battle was quickly taken into the sky. Although there were the formations of saints here, a battle between two eternal river tier elites, especially two whose battle prowess had reached the consummate level, would definitely be able to destroy all of these formations. Of course, if these formations hadn't existed, then everything in the surroundings would have already been obliterated. In fact, this expanse of land would have become part of the sea. Such a tremendous battle naturally attracted the attention of many people. The disciples all walked out from their residences and gazed up at the sky. However, what they saw instantly caused cold sweat to form on their foreheads. Incredible! This battle is far too incredible. Who is this? She's actually able to rival a big shot. You Susu? No! Someone recognized the Empress, and they quietly revealed her identity. This information quickly spread among the disciples. She was a newly recruited disciple. The old disciples all became numb with shock upon hearing this. What kind of freaks had the academy recruited this time? Gu Daoui had possessed a divine fetus, and he had more so been regarded as the greatest prodigy of all eternity. In fact, he had even become a disciple of the great saint. After him, there was also Ling Han, a new disciple who was renowned as a troublemaker. He was someone who even dared to talk back to the Saint Missus. At the same time, Ling Han also possessed astonishing strength. During the competition between new disciples, he had even managed to defeat Gu Daoui. Moreover, many old disciples had also experienced defeat at his hands. It was rumored that even elites at the consummate level of the Eternal River tier mightn't be able to suppress him. However, regardless of their achievements, there was an indestructible bottom line in the minds of the old disciples. The big shots couldn't be defeated. Regardless of how freakish the new disciples were, they would have no option but to bow their heads before the four big shots. Now, however, this final bottom line had also been obliterated. Empress Luan Xing was battling against a big shot, and she was only at a very minor disadvantage. How is this possible? It's that brick. That's right. Through my careful observations, I've noticed that her brick possesses an incredibly powerful defensive ability. It's as if it can absorb all attacks. Otherwise, that woman definitely couldn't rival a big shot. Even if that's the case, she still possesses astonishing battle prowess. After all, she's only at a minor disadvantage. She's also breathtakingly beautiful. Heavens! How can there be such a stunningly beautiful person in the world? She's so noble and she's so proud. In fact, even her angry expression is beautiful and intoxicating. Before this, the Empress had only revealed her appearance during the competition between the new disciples. As such, none of the old disciples had ever witnessed her appearance before. Now that they witnessed it, they were all stunned by her beauty. Moreover, they naturally shifted to supporting her instead of Kai Miao. Of course, this was only in terms of the male students. Contrary to them, the female students were all wild with jealousy. They strongly desired for Kai Miao to ruin her beauty. However, the cultivation world was dominated by men, and the 8th campus was no exception to this phenomenon. There were only 30 or so female disciples in the entire 8th campus. Thus, they naturally couldn't turn the tide of popular opinion. Everyone was shouting in support of the Empress, not considering the fact that Kai Miao might settle matters with them one by one after this. Humph! Zhu Xiaoer was enraged, and she humphed coldly as she unleashed her might as the Saint Missus. An expression of wild fury spread across Zhu Xiaoer's face. You're looking down on me far too much. However, she was truly helpless against Ling Han. After all, there were only so many people who could suppress him. Could it be that she had to seek help from the Tranquil Heart Saint? However, if he had wanted to greet her, he would have done so a long time ago. With the divine sense of a saint, how could he have not detected her arrival? The fact that he hadn't come over to greet her signified that he wanted to avoid her. Since this was the case, would she be able to find him? Zhu Xiaoer felt extremely stifled. With her lofty status, she was actually unable to deal with a measly disciple of the academy. Wang! A saintly might rippled into the surroundings as the Tranquil Heart Saint unexpectedly appeared before the disciples. Zhu Xiaoer couldn't help but chuckle coldly and say, Tranquil Heart, how arrogant of you! I've been here for so long, yet you're only coming here to greet me now. The Tranquil Heart Saint ignored her accusations, frowning slightly as he gazed up at the sky. Ling Han was slightly astonished. The Tranquil Heart Saint wasn't faking his expression. However, what could cause a saint to frown? Wang! A thick golden path suddenly descended from the sky, exuding a saintly might as it did so. Another saint had arrived. In the blink of an eye, a figure walked out from among the dazzling golden path. It looked as if he were walking slowly, yet each stride of his could actually cover hundreds of millions of kilometers. Before the disciples knew it, he had already arrived inside the academy. This was a tall and slim middle-aged man. His skin was pale, and there was the symbol of a rock between his brows. How should I address you, fellow cultivator? The Tranquil Heart Saint asked. His tone was extremely solemn. Saints were the most powerful beings of the world. Even if this person were only a small saint, he would still possess the ability to kill everyone present if he went wild. Of course, this was apart from the 10 saints. However, the wife and son of the Star Sand Saint were present, so the Tranquil Heart Saint naturally didn't dare to be careless. The middle-aged man glanced at the Tranquil Heart Saint before replying, I'm Huing Mu. Fellow cultivator Hu. The Tranquil Heart Saint clasped his hands in greeting. I'm Tranquil Heart. Dare I ask why you've suddenly come here? Huing Mu calmly glanced at him again and said, several young members of the Hu clan were killed, and through my deduction, I've concluded that their deaths are related to this place. He was here to seek revenge. The Tranquil Heart Saint's expression darkened, and he said, then you must investigate carefully. After all, a case involving human lives should be treated with utmost care. Huing Mu was unfazed by the Tranquil Heart Saint's words. He swept his gaze over every single disciple. Under his gaze, the disciples all felt as if they were naked, with not a single secret able to remain hidden. Only when the Tranquil Heart Saint humphed did he retract his gaze. I've already discovered an ancient chariot on a nearby planet. That's definitely not a chariot that you people can possess. From my deductions, someone here coincidentally came across the disciples of my Hu clan after they obtained some treasures. They then attacked my disciples and ended up killing them. He paused for a moment before continuing, my request is simple. Hand over the treasures and the culprit. The Tranquil Heart Saint chuckled coldly. You're acting far too arrogant. You suddenly arrived here, and now you're asking for this and that? Do you think this is your territory? You're only a small saint, yet there are 10 saints guarding this planet. In fact, there's even a great saint. There's no room for you to act all smug and arrogant. I have no obligation to satisfy your request, the Tranquil Heart Saint said. He resolutely refuted Huing Mu's request. Huing Mu was just about to get angry, yet he suddenly saw Empress Luanxing and Kai Miao descend from the sky at this moment. In fact, he had only managed to descend here because he had discovered the Empress battle against Kai Miao. After all, they were extremely powerful Eternal River tier elites. He had been unfazed before, yet his eyes instantly lit up when he saw Empress Luanxing. The Empress' beauty was definitely enough to capture the hearts of all men. Even saints were no exception to this. Saints were also human, just that they were slightly more powerful. In any case, Huing Mu hadn't cultivated so earnestly for some noble and lofty aim. Indeed, Every single cultivator yearned to become a Genesis tier saint. However, this wasn't their ultimate goal, and there was naturally a reason behind their desire. Some people simply wanted to become more powerful, while others wanted to obtain a longer lifespan. Meanwhile, there were also those who desired to obtain more power, those who wanted freedom, and those who wanted beautiful women. Huangmu wasn't that interested in women, but the Empress beauty was enough to capture his interest and shatter his self-control. Moreover, as a saint, he would naturally take whatever he wanted. He didn't need to be afraid of anything or anyone. As such, he reached over and wantonly grabbed at Empress Luan Xing. Chapter 1531 Surrounded by Saints. How dare you? The tranquil hot saint roared in rage. This person actually dared to kidnap his disciple before his eyes? Did this person think that he was a pushover? He lashed out with his palm, his might as a saint also emanating outward. Even heaven and earth would lose their luster when a saint unleashed their fury. Huangmu humphed upon seeing this. He had no choice but to retract his hand and parry the Tranquil Heart Saint's attack. Even though he viewed himself as far superior to the Tranquil Heart Saint, his opponent was still a fellow saint, after all. Thus, how could he dare to face the Tranquil Heart Saint's attack without any defenses? That would be seeking death. Pang! The two of them exchanged a strike, sending bursts of shock waves rippling into the surroundings. Boom! The entire campus was instantly obliterated by these devastating shock waves. At the same time, countless people were thrown into the air as if they were mere hay. Some of them vomited blood, while some others suffered even worse fate. They had their arms or legs brutally torn off. At this moment, it was as if the campus had become a living hell. Fortunately, they still had the saint-level formation to block some of the shock waves. As such, none of the disciples were killed. This was the power of saints. Just a tiny fraction of the shock waves from their exchange was already devastating enough to slaughter countless people. Moreover, this was already in the scenario where there was a saint-level formation to block some of the shock waves. If they continued to exchange blows like this, the disciples of the academy would definitely suffer huge casualties. Damn it! The Tranquil Heart Saint cursed. His hair was standing on ends, and it was clear that he was beside himself with fury. Under the influence of the Star Sand Saint, the Tranquil Heart Saint and the other 8 small saints had all developed a hobby of nurturing young talents. They didn't necessarily treat each of their disciples as a son or daughter, but they did indeed pour a lot of their time and effort into raising them. However, the academy that they had developed for so many years was going to be whimsically destroyed just like this? And their disciples were more so going to be wantonly slaughtered? Thus, it was only natural that the Tranquil Heart Saint was incandescent with rage. Do you have the right or ability to stop me? Huangmu sneered. Couldn't they see that he had come from the Forbidden Land? As such, was his battle prowess one that a small saint could rival? He couldn't care less about the lives of these cultivators. He immediately launched another attack, seeking to suppress the Tranquil Heart Saint. You've taken things too far, the Tranquil Heart Saint roared. Wang! The godly bones in his body lit up as he activated them. He raised a hand, and a burst of sword light instantly swept outward, illuminating the entire sky. Huangmu faltered for a moment. He then turned around and retreated several steps. He was slightly astonished. I've indeed underestimated you. You've actually managed to transform your own body into a formation. The Tranquil Heart Saint remained silent as he continued to launch attacks at Huangmu. His body was surrounded by sword intent, and it was extremely evident that he was truly enraged. His killing intent was already soaring into the sky. However, this still isn't enough to stop me, Huangmu announced haughtily. 8 stones technique. His muscles started to bulge up, and he quickly transformed into a gigantic rock golem. Each rock that he was composed of was like an indestructible saintly material. That was right, his body would be as tough as saintly material of the same level when he channeled the 8 stones technique. You're nothing but a mere ant. He wore an expression of utter disdain as he charged at the Tranquil Heart Saint. In the eyes of those from the Forbidden Lands, cultivators from the immortal realm were nothing but mere ants. This would be the case even if they were Genesis tier saints. At most, they could only be considered as slightly more powerful ants. This was an innate contempt that they held. The 2 saints were locked in an intense battle. Meanwhile, The others were all fleeing for their lives. Otherwise, they would definitely be killed if they were accidentally hit by a shockwave from the battle.
Wang 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 wang.
Several golden paths streaked over one after another. The Black River Saint, Dawn Cloud Saint, and the remaining 8 small saints had all rushed over. They acted in unison and immediately dissipated the shock waves that were surging into the surroundings. If they didn't do so, the disciples would definitely suffer a casualty rate of over 60%. Moreover, these small saints hadn't come by themselves. In fact, they were all accompanied by some disciples from their own campuses. Of course, these were all the most outstanding disciples. With his worries gone, and with 8 other small saints to guard the surroundings, the Tranquil Heart Saint instantly unleashed his full battle prowess. However, Huingmu truly hadn't been lying. He was indeed more powerful than the Tranquil Heart Saint. This was especially the case now that he was channeling the 8-stone technique. His physique was astonishing, and few at the same cultivation level as him would be able to wound him. Put simply, he was near undefeatable. This was also the reason why he dared to provoke others so wantonly, and the reason that he looked down upon other saints. What? The Tranquil Heart Saint is actually being suppressed by him. It can't be. Although the Tranquil Heart Saint is the 8th out of the Star Sand Saint's 9 disciples, his battle prowess is definitely powerful enough to rank within the top 3. Don't worry. We have 9 saints on our side. The disciples were all engrossed by the spectacular battle. Saints were synonymous with invincibility in their minds, yet a battle between 2 saints would naturally yield a victor and a loser. It was just that they hadn't expected Huingmu to be more powerful. Humph! The Dipankara Saint and Hardship Alchemy Saint leaped forward and joined the battle in unison. If they didn't act now, it would only be a matter of time before the Tranquil Heart Saint was defeated. To say nothing of 3 saints, I'll still suppress you if all 9 of you join, Huingmu said with a sneer. These saints had relied on themselves to discover the saintly Tao. Thus, how could their Tao rival the inheritances from the Forbidden Lands? Huingmu roared as he swung his fists in unison, unleashing a boundless power. His 3 opponents didn't dare to face his attack head-on. In fact, they had no option but to continuously retreat. The Torrential Rain Saint and Iron Saber Saint exchanged a glance before both leaping over to join the battle as well. However, they were still unable to gain the upper hand. Everyone was stunned. They were all saints, so how did their battle prowess differ by so much? This wasn't a small gap in power, but rather a huge gulf in power. The 5 saints had teamed up, yet they were still unable to suppress Huingmu. In fact, Huingmu was the one who was enjoying the advantage. This was unbelievable. Now that it had come to this, the remainder of the 9 saints had no choice but to join the battle. Only then were they able to wrest back some momentum. However, defeating Huingmu was nothing more than a pipe dream. That's enough, a calm voice suddenly said. This voice was like the intent of heaven and earth, and it was not something that the cultivators could resist. Master! The 9 saints naturally pulled away from the battle. A conflicting look appeared on Huingmu's face. In the end, however, he still decided to stop. So there was still another saint. Your strength is above mine, so I wasn't able to detect you at all. Even though he said this, the look of haughtiness on his face wasn't dampened in the slightest. This was because he was a member of the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Any random Grand Elder from there could easily crush the cultivators of the immortal realm. The Star Sand Saint said coldly. In his eyes, his disciples weren't just his disciples. They were also his face and his reputation. If he failed to protect even his disciples, then what right did he have to be a great saint? In any case, Huingmu was just a small saint. Regardless of how powerful he was, the fact remained that he was a small saint. Friend, Huingmu began. The 9 saints were furious upon hearing this. Huingmu was but a small saint, yet he was actually referring to their esteemed master as friend. Was he trying to speak on the same level as their master? How audacious! However, Huingmu was unfazed by their furious glares, and he continued, You can't begin to imagine just how powerful the place that I come from is. If you disobey me, all of you will die. Humph! The Star Sand Saint was also unable to contain his anger any longer. A large hand instantly descended from the sky and swatted at Huingmu. The Star Sand Saint didn't even need to show himself. The gulf in power between a great saint and a small saint was analogous to the gulf in power between a mountain river tier cultivator and a mere mortal. It was insurmountable. Boom! To say nothing of blocking this attack, Hu Yingmu didn't even have the ability to flee from this attack. He instantly disappeared under the large hand. However, there was a sudden flash of gray light. Pa! The large hand was surprisingly shattered, revealing Hu Yingmu's unscathed figure. Gasp! Even a great saint couldn't contain him. Chapter 1532. Who can withstand a single strike of mine? Hu Yingmu's body was shrouded in a layer of dazzling light. Looking closely, the cultivators discovered that this was actually a precious robe. There were several glowing divine patterns on this robe, and it was as if heaven and earth were expounding some profoundly mysterious notion. Hu Yingmu hadn't been able to resist the attack of the great saint because of his own abilities, but rather because of this precious robe. In fact, this was much more understandable. If he truly had been that powerful, then wouldn't he have suppressed the Tranquil Heart Saint and the other small saint long ago? Ha 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 ha! Hu Yingmu roared with laughter. You people are nothing but a smattering of ants. Yet, you actually attempted to injure me? Where is your confidence coming from? Audacious! How incredibly audacious! In any case, it's not as if you genuinely have the power to resist the attack of a saint. Hu Yingmu peered down at the cultivators and said, "What a bunch of trash. You people will still be trash even if you manage to reach the saint tier." This was the sense of superiority that those from the Forbidden Lands possessed. Hu Yingmu held an innate disdain for those of the immortal realm, especially since he had viewed himself as a descendant from the celestial realm since the very beginning. He was convinced that he would one day return to the celestial realm. The Star Sand Saint's voice rang out again. Your precious robe isn't truly woven from saintly material. Rather, it's like a decree in that there's a limit regarding how long it can be used for. So, how long can you withstand my attacks for? I can withstand 100 of your attacks without a problem, Hu Yingmu replied confidently. He retrieved a drum and said, "This is a child-parent drum, and once I strike it and channel my divine sense into it, I'll be able to instantly teleport to the location of the parent drum. You're a great saint, and I'm indeed unable to rival you. However, there are 3 saint kings in the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, and any one of them possesses the ability to reign supreme over the entire world. Are you sure you want to provoke the ancestors of my clan?" This was a blatant threat. However, this threat was very effective. Saint Kings. What kind of concept was this? These were beings who were unrivaled throughout heaven and earth. They were the most powerful beings of the immortal realm. The gulf between saint kings and great saints was like the gulf between great saints and small saint. They would possess a definite and overwhelming advantage. If they truly provoked a saint king, what kind of calamity would they be bringing upon themselves? Heavens! There are genuinely saint kings in this world? Is he bluffing? The 10 saints all shook their heads. With their experience, they could naturally determine the level of the divine patterns on Hu Yingmu's precious robe. It had indeed surpassed the level of great saint. In other words, there was indeed a saint king within the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. Of course, it was still anyone's guess if there was 1 saint king or 3. The Star Sand Saint remained silent, and his 9 disciples also remained silent. Ha 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 ha! Only Hu Yingmu's wanton and arrogant laugh reverberated throughout the surroundings. What a bunch of weaklings. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but I can withstand the strike of a great saint. However, which of you can withstand a single strike of mine? Is this even comparable? You're wearing a precious robe, and this is the only reason you were able to withstand the attack of the great saint. It wasn't through your own abilities. However, you're using this as a foundation for your arrogance, and you're even looking down on the 10 saints. This is crossing the line. However, who dared to retort him? He had withstood the attack from the Star Sand Saint. However, among those below the level of Great Saint, who could withstand a single strike of his? Is there anyone? Is there? Hu Yingmu shouted arrogantly. You're nothing but a bunch of weaklings. Am I wrong to say this? You're pushing it, the Star Sand Saint humphed. Hu Yingmu was a small saint, yet he actually dared to display such unbridled arrogance before him. How many years had it been since he had experienced such provocation and disrespect? Hu Yingmu reeled himself in a little, but there was still a cold sneer on his face. My request still remains the same. Hand the culprit over, hand the treasures over, and hand that woman over. Otherwise, you can also select a person from among you. If they can withstand a single strike of mine, I'll retract my previous statements and even offer an apology. I'll then leave straight away. The 9 saints were infuriated upon hearing this. Hu Yingmu still dared to issue such blatantly unfair challenges. They were already showing incredible restraint by allowing him to go free. If you refuse, I'll invite the ancestor of the Forbidden Land over, Hu Yingmu said menacingly. At that time, all of you will only have the option of death. How incredibly arrogant. The disciples were all outraged. Even if you're a saint, you're still taking things too far. Let me go. Let me go. I'll face his attack. Numerous hot-blooded youth stepped forward and volunteered to accept Hu Yingmu's challenge. In fact, there were many big shots among these volunteers. These were supreme prodigies, and they were cultivators who were birthed and nurtured by heaven and earth. They possessed power that was unimaginable to most people. Moreover, they were only a step away from reaching the saint tier. However, this single step was like the insurmountable gulf between heaven and earth. All of you get back, the tranquil heart saint chided. The disciples all felt extremely aggrieved. The Star Sand Martial Arts Academy was a holy land for the hundreds of nearby galaxies. Whenever one mentioned the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, it was as if they were talking about a pilgrimage site. This was a holy land that had produced countless powerful elites. Now, however, a single outsider had intruded and trampled all of them under his feet. This was both humiliating and infuriating. In fact, I won't mind if one of you 9 accepts this challenge, either. Hu Yingmu said as he looked toward the 9 saints. They were all small saints, so how could the 9 saints fail to block just one of his strikes? The tranquil heart saint stepped forward and said, I'll battle against you. You're not worthy, Hu Yingmu said with a shake of his head. There was disdain in his voice, and he continued, You definitely won't be able to withstand a single strike of mine. Upon seeing the expression of fury on the tranquil heart saint's face, he asked, Did you think I was fighting with my full power just then? What? The tranquil heart saint pondered this question for a moment. In the end, he couldn't help but shake his head. He refused to believe that Hu Yingmu was this powerful. If you can withstand a single strike of mine, I'll immediately turn around and leave. Hu Yingmu lifted a finger and made a tapping motion at the tranquil heart saint. Wang! His precious robe lit up, with all of the divine patterns unleashing a brilliant glow. At the same time, a small black dot formed on the tip of his finger. However, this small black dot gave one a feeling of profoundness and boundlessness. Pang! His attack landed, and the tranquil heart saint was instantly sent flying. His face was frighteningly pale, and he was coughing up large mouthfuls of blood. Just how powerful was the tranquil heart saint? Yet, he was still unable to withstand the power of a single finger from Hu Yingmu. Everyone was aware of what had happened. It was thanks to the might of his precious robe that Hu Yingmu had been able to defeat the tranquil heart saint with a single strike. However, since this precious robe was being worn by Hu Yingmu, it could also be considered as a part of his abilities. After all, could one request their opponent to remove all of their high-level god tools in battle? Of course not. Is there anyone else? Hu Yingmu's expression was full of arrogance. Sweeping his gaze over the 9 saints one by one, the corners of his lips started to curl up in an even more disdainful smile. Even though the 9 saints were bursting with rage, not a single one of them opened their mouth to accept his challenge. Although the Tranquil Heart Saint was the Star Sand Saint's 8th disciple, he ranked in the top 3 when it came to battle prowess. However, even he had failed to withstand a single strike of Hu Yingmu. Thus, the other saints would certainly suffer an identical fate if they stepped forward. That being the case, they would merely be seeking humiliation if they accepted Hu Yingmu's challenge. However, looking at his arrogant expression, how could they not shake with absolute fury? Is there no one else? What a bunch of weaklings! Hu Yingmu shook his head and continued, Remember to inscribe the word weakling in your minds in the future. That's how tiny and insignificant you people are. Now, hurry up and hand me what I want. He was incredibly conceited. He had come from a forbidden land after all, so it was as if he were a heavenly emperor coming out to survey the world. Those of the immortal realm were only worthy to kneel down in his presence. I'll accept your challenge. At this moment, a calm voice suddenly shattered the silence. At the same time, a young man stepped forward from the crowd of disciples. Shua! Everyone immediately turned around to look at the source of the voice. Ling Han. No one could have ever imagined this. Even the 9 saints were unable to withstand Hu Yingmu's might, yet Ling Han was actually stepping forward to accept his challenge. Senior brother Ling! The new disciples couldn't help but shout. They were all incredibly moved. They naturally didn't believe that Ling Han was more powerful than the 9 saints. However, Ling Han had still stepped forward even after seeing one of the 9 saints being defeated with a single strike. What kind of courage did this take? The senior disciples were also moved upon seeing this. They had all heard about Ling Han's audacity in daring to retort the Saint Misses before. He was truly a courageous individual. However, his opponent this time was a saint. Moreover, this was an unfathomably powerful saint. Ling Han was gambling with his life. Some of the disciples felt that Ling Han was incredibly foolish. They felt that he shouldn't have acted so recklessly. However, they still admired his courage. Perhaps he was seeking death by accepting Hu Yingmu's challenge. However, he was also raising the morale of the entire martial arts academy. There were things that couldn't be abandoned, and there were also times when they couldn't keel over and submit. Chapter 1533 I'll go. After stabilizing himself, the tranquil heart saint glared at Ling Han and said, "Cut the nonsense out. Get back." What an absolute joke. He hadn't died yet, so did he need his disciple to step forward to block his enemy for him? However, Ling Han smiled and said, "He's nothing more than a no-name from some small unknown place. What does it matter if I face a single strike of his? No name." The disciples were all worked into a fervor upon hearing his words. Aren't you extremely arrogant? Well, we're even more arrogant. Good on you, Senior Brother Ling. Senior Brother Ling, I love you. The new disciples all shouted in excitement. They were young, and thus they were all hot-blooded and easily worked up. However, many of the senior disciples were also influenced by this atmosphere, and they also joined into the chorus of shouting disciples. Even if they were killed by Hu Yingmu one by one, they still couldn't back down and weakly submit. They could lose, but they couldn't abandon their dignity. A cold look appeared in Hu Yingmu's eyes. These mere ants actually dared to belittle him? He waved his hand and said, "Come, I'll make sure to smash you into pieces with a single strike. In fact, I'll keep all of the broken pieces the same size as well." Ling Han waved his hand right back saying, "Enough with the boasting. In any case, you're about to be slapped in the face." Ha ha! Hu Yingmu roared with laughter. This young man was truly arrogant. TSK, he was only 100 or so, yet he had already reached the peak stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. His talent was truly quite astonishing. In fact, this talent was already on par with the supreme prodigies of the Forbidden Lands. Perhaps even superior. Killing a prodigy like this would probably give him a great sense of achievement. Guy whose child doesn't have an asshole, hurry up and attack me. Grandpa Dog will concede that you're powerful if you manage to push me back a single step. A loud bark suddenly sounded from among the disciples. It went without saying that this was the voice of the large black dog. After all, how could he not participate in such an exciting confrontation? Hu Yingmu's expression instantly changed. He had been fully focused on cultivation for the entire first half of his life. As such, he had never considered the problem of having children and descendants. Rather, he planned to marry hundreds of women after advancing to the saint tier. However, having children as a saint was extremely difficult. Right now, this grandpa dog or whatever was actually cursing him to have children without assholes. This struck him right where it hurt. Who's barking? He wore a baleful expression as he swept his eyes over the disciples. It's your grandpa dog. If you can, come and bite me. The large black dog's voice was adrift, and it sounded like it was coming from different locations whenever he spoke. Even the saints were unable to pinpoint his location. His skills were extremely mysterious. Huingmu unleashed his divine sense, which surged outward like billowing waves. He was going to uncover the large black dog. "Oi, are you going to fight or not?" Ling Han asked impatiently. "You're a saint after all, so why are you being so whiny and hesitant?" Everyone laughed upon hearing this. Huingmu was being relentlessly teased by Ling Han and the large black dog, and this dragged the disciples out from the frustration and hopelessness they had felt after the defeat suffered by the 9 saints. Huingmu trained his gaze on Ling Han. Although he felt a strong desire to kill the large black dog, he was aware that he wouldn't be able to find him anytime soon. Thus, it wouldn't hurt to kill Ling Han first. This was also a supreme prodigy, and thus killing him would definitely give him a strong sense of achievement. Moreover, this person had even dared to ridicule him. Did he not deserve to die? "Hold it right there," the tranquil hot saint roared as he stepped forward. He couldn't allow his disciple to battle for him. Xiao! Another golden path appeared as the Star Sand Saint descended upon the scene. He couldn't maintain his composure any longer. He gave Ling Han a stare before waving his sleeves and saying, "Stand back." Although Ling Han's talent was inferior to Gu Daoi's, his battle prowess among those at the same cultivation level was stronger. Thus, the Star Sand Saint also had strong hopes for him. This being the case, he couldn't bear to watch him die. The Star Sand Saint turned around to face Huingmu. "You can piss off now," he chided. However, Huingmu was unfazed by this and he said, "I'll naturally leave if you give me what I want. Otherwise, I can also leave if one of you is able to withstand a single strike of mine. Not only will I leave, but I'll even offer an apology. I'll admit that I underestimated you ants and weaklings." He was still as arrogant as always, even in the presence of a great saint. The Star Sand Saint wore a dark expression, and there was killing intent emanating from his body. He felt a strong desire to kill this person, even if it meant provoking the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands. "Let me face him," Ling Han said as he stepped forward again. "He's but a mere pawn, so there's no need for you to personally deal with him. Believe me." There was a look of strong conviction on Ling Han's face. An Eternal River Tier elite had actually uttered the words, "Believe me," before a great saint. What kind of confidence and boldness was this? The Star Sand Saint was involuntarily stirred by Ling Han's demeanor. At the same time, a rare feeling of doubt arose in his mind. Had he misjudged Ling Han? Talent was indeed very important. However, had Gu Daoi possessed the type of confidence and domineering demeanor that Ling Han was displaying right now? This domineering nature, this confidence, this demeanor. Even the great saint was moved by Ling Han's spectacular display. This young man is incredible. He's definitely going to become a supreme elite. The Star Sand Saint silently made a decision in his mind. He was definitely going to protect Ling Han no matter what, even if this meant killing Huingmu and provoking the Saint Kings of the Forbidden Lands. If worse came to worst, he would simply relocate the entire martial arts academy. With the ginormous size of the immortal realm, could they not find somewhere safe to relocate? Ling Han took a few steps forward until he was standing face to face with Huingmu. "Only one strike?" he asked. Huingmu was in no hurry either, and he calmly replied, "Only one strike." Ling Han smiled and said, "How about 3 strikes? I'm afraid that you'll renege on your promise in anger and embarrassment if you fail to defeat me in a single strike." Pooh! Many of the disciples spluttered in shock upon hearing this. That was a saint he was speaking to. When a saint came up against an Eternal River Tier elite, unleashing 1 strike or unleashing 10,000 strikes wouldn't make an iota of difference. After all, the latter would be killed in a single strike. He was ridiculing him. Ling Han was definitely ridiculing Huingmu. Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant! That Huingmu is far too arrogant. It's only right that he also gets a taste of his own medicine. The large black dog couldn't help but stroke his chin as he stood upright on his hind legs. This brat is learning more and more of my demeanor. Could he be a child that I accidentally fathered in the past? Fortunately, Ling Han wasn't there to hear his musings. Otherwise, he would definitely chase after the large black dog and beat him to death. Huingmu's eyes bulged in anger upon hearing this. There were flames of rage burning within them. The tongue of this person was far too toxic. He definitely couldn't allow him to speak anymore. Otherwise, he would die of rage even if he was a saint. Die, measly ant! He immediately launched an attack, swatting his palm at Ling Han. He didn't activate any secret technique, and he more so didn't unleash the might of his precious robe. This was a simple and unremarkable strike. Their expressions were indescribably strange. The disciples had all thought that the 10 saints would intervene before Hu Yingmu's attack landed. However, Hu Yingmu's palm had already pressed down, yet the saints were still standing there unmoving. It was as if they were stone statues. Why are they not intervening? Why are they watching Ling Han get killed just like this? How can this be? The attack of a saint was naturally devastating. The surroundings were flooded with plumes of dust and earth, though they were rapidly dissipating and settling down. Pooh! The disciples all spluttered in unison when they saw a figure walking out from amid the plumes of dust and earth. Their jaws dropped open, and their eyes bulged out. It was as if they had been turned into stone. That was Ling Han, perfectly fine and unscathed. An Eternal River Tier elite, one at the low extreme no less, had actually withstood an attack from a saint even though this was only a casual attack. Titatitas. This was definitely the most absurd thing in the world. This was completely unfathomable. There was definitely something wrong with the heavens. Holy fucking God. Chapter 1534. Hold it right there. Who could have imagined that Ling Han would be able to withstand the attack of a saint? This was completely unfathomable. In fact, the disciples were unable to digest this even though they had witnessed it with their very own eyes. Hu Yingmu also widened his eyes in shock. He was unable to believe what he saw. What the fuck? Holy motherfucker. Have I been cursed or something, causing the power of my attack to drop considerably? Otherwise, how could an Eternal River Tier elite have blocked my attack? This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make any sense at all. There was a period of deathly silence before a chorus of deafening cheers suddenly erupted. This was incredibly uplifting. Although they had felt refreshed when hearing Ling Han and the large black dog ridicule Hu Yingmu just then, they had all been aware that doing so was merely a cheap shot of no significance. In the end, what was truly important was still strength. Thus, they had all yearned for there to be a hero, one who could make Hu Yingmu swallow his own words and one who could show Hu Yingmu the might and glory of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy. However, they had also known that this was merely a daydream. Even the 9 saints couldn't withstand a single strike of his, so who else would possess the power to battle against him? After all, they couldn't rely on the Star Sand Saint to step forward, could they? Even if he won, what would it actually prove? It was only natural that a great saint would possess a crushing advantage over a small saint. However, just as they were about to fall into despair, a true hero had suddenly stepped forward. Moreover, he had truly managed to block Hu Yingmu's strike. In fact, he had walked away from it unscathed. Senior Brother Ling. Senior Brother Ling. Senior Brother Ling. The cheers were deafening, and even the senior disciples started to call Ling Han their senior brother. Fuck, he was someone who could withstand a strike from a saint. As such, would they feel any embarrassment in calling him senior brother? If they didn't call him senior brother now, they might not even be able to make friends or claim ties with him in the future. It was almost a given that Ling Han would become a saint in the future. In any case, who would believe it if someone claimed otherwise? Long Xiangyue's eyes lit up, and there was a look of adoration on her face. This man had once asked for her dragon horn. That was an expression of love. Meanwhile, Second in the World clicked his tongue in wonder as he quietly mumbled the word freak. His physique was also extremely sturdy, yet Ling Han was already on a whole other level. Zi Chenfeng, Hong Ma, and the others also shook their heads and sighed in wonderment. The gulf between them and Ling Han had seemingly grown to an insurmountable level already. Of everyone present, only Ling Han, Empress Luan Xing, and a few others knew that Ling Han hadn't blocked Hu Yingmu's attack with his own strength, but rather had relied on the might of the indestructible heaven scroll to withstand the attack of the saint. In fact, he had already possessed the ability to withstand one full power strike of a saint when he was at the heavenly body tier. Now that his cultivation had risen explosively, it was only natural that he could withstand a few more strikes. It was because of this that he had challenged Hu Yingmu to a battle of 3 strikes. Of course, This was a very conservative number. He could definitely withstand 3 strikes. Apologize. Fuck off. The disciples suddenly started to heckle Mu, their expressions fervent and their shouts bordering on wild. This is far too fucking uplifting. This is far too fucking soothing. What saint? Piece of absolute dog *T. Fuck off. The jeers were like roaring waves, and they were like collapsing mountains. He was an elite from the Forbidden Lands, so how could he raise his head in the future if the others learned that he had apologized to ants in the past? There are 2 more strikes, he said. Everyone's jaw dropped upon hearing this. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. Are you really a fucking saint? Can you be any more fucking shameless? You're legitimately going to attack 3 times. What kind of fucking saint are you? Utter trash. The disciples all booed and jeered. In fact, they could barely contain their urge to stick their middle fingers in Mu's face. Mu acted as if he couldn't hear them. Compared to the scorn from these ants, he more so didn't want to apologize to them in public. In any case, it was Ling Han who had asked for him to launch 3 strikes anyway. Without waiting for Ling Han's agreement, he directly raised his palm. He was serious this time, and there was divine light flickering in his eyes. At the same time, a silver river materialized behind his back. This silver river was filled with dazzling stars, so many that they were uncountable at a glance. Upon seeing this, Ling Han also unleashed his own silver river. He was purposefully doing this to compare their silver rivers. 99 heavenly bodies. The stark contrast between the might of their silver rivers was truly astounding. Moreover, since they had unleashed their silver rivers, it would be impossible for them to hide their cultivation level. Boom! Mu lashed out again, his heavenly bodies radiating with brilliance as his palm struck down. An overwhelming pressure crushed the surroundings. Ling Han didn't have the time to even dodge this strike. Saints were far too quick in their attack. In fact, this attack had been so quick that even his divine sense hadn't been able to follow it. Pang! The devastating palm strike once again sent plumes of dust and earth into the air. The disciples all had their hearts in their mouths. Although Ling Han had blocked the strike just then, Mu definitely hadn't been attacking with his full strength. The dust cleared, revealing a figure who was still standing upright and proud. Ling Han. Senior brother Ling. Ling Han. The disciples faltered for a moment before roaring in fervent excitement again. Their voices were 100 times louder and more fervent than before. They were far too excited. If Mu could have still peddled the excuse of not having tried just then the result of this strike had truly rendered this excuse void. He had already gathered power for half a day to launch his attack, so could he still be shameless enough to whine and make excuses? There was a bright glimmer in the eyes of the Star Sand Saint and his 9 disciples. They could say with 100% certainty that Ling Han had genuinely withstood both of these attacks with his own abilities. He hadn't relied on some precious armor or precious robe. This young man was incredible. Meanwhile, Mu wore a look of shock and disbelief. Why hasn't he died yet? He's only at the Eternal River tier, so why is he so difficult to kill? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There's still 1 more strike left. Are you going to use it or not? If not, then retract your statements, apologize, and then piss off." Mu was boiling with rage, and he truly wanted to kill Ling Han. He refused to believe that an Eternal River tier elite truly possessed the ability to withstand his attacks. Ling Han had definitely practiced some mysterious technique that would allow him to possess a power that rivaled him for a short period of time. What kind of cultivation technique is this? It's far too impressive. He nodded in his mind. He definitely had to obtain this cultivation technique. Even in the celestial realm, such a cultivation technique would still most likely be considered a paramount secret technique. Perhaps it was something that only celestial kings could practice. I'll return and request an ancestor to come and suppress this great saint. I'll then capture Ling Han and force the cultivation technique from him. I admit defeat, he said. He then turned around to leave. Where's the apology? The students shouted. They were extremely unhappy with his attitude. Hadn't he been all arrogant and haughty just then? Why was he cowering now? Mu flicked his sleeves in annoyance. What? Were these people going to threaten him or something? Humph. A saintly might radiated from the Star Sand Saint's body, and he said, "The most important quality of cultivators is trust and honor. If you go back on your promise, I'll make sure to kill you on the spot." Hu Yingmu's expression involuntarily changed. He could indeed rival the power of this great saint for a short period of time. However, he could only withstand 100 or so of his attacks. This was the limit of the divine patterns on his precious robe. After that, he would revert to being a small saint who was only slightly more powerful than ordinary small saints. Thus, what right did he have to argue with a great saint? Moreover, upon seeing the look of resoluteness on the Star Sand Saint's face, he was certain that this great saint wasn't joking around with him. Wise men didn't fight against the odds. Hu Yingmu hesitated for a moment before saying, "I retract my previous statements and apologize." The disciples instantly whooped in joy upon hearing this. Just how arrogant had Hu Yingmu been just then? Yet, he was being forced to obediently apologize now. This was the might of the Star Sand Saint. This was the might of Ling Han. Hu Yingmu turned around in bitter resentment and was just about to leave. "Hold it right there," Ling Han said as he dashed before Hu Yingmu. There was raging killing intent in his eyes and he said, "You were apologizing for your ignorance just then. Now, however, I want to settle another score with you. You actually dared to target my wife. Toward people like you, I have a habit of killing them without mercy." Pooh! Everyone was transfixed with shock upon hearing this. Many people couldn't help but splutter in astonishment. What? Am I hearing things? Is there something wrong with my ears? Chapter 1535 I Want to Kill the Sane. Ling Han actually said he wanted to kill Hu Yingmu. He had to be joking. True, Ling Han was indeed very strong, and had even reached a nature-defying extent. He had taken 2 attacks from a saint forcefully, but even so, not one person believed that Ling Han truly was qualified to stand against a saint. That was completely unreal. Otherwise, why had you come to the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy? Who would be worthy of teaching you? When Ling Han had entered the 8th campus, if it hadn't been for Ren Feiyun stepping out to save him, he would probably have been forced to crawl through the dog's hole. How could he possibly have the abilities to match a saint? Everyone shook their heads, and thought that Ling Han had lost his own measure in his pride. "Senior brother Ling, forget it. Since this stray dog has already admitted defeat, we will just be generous, and spare him just this once." "That's right, Senior brother Ling, there is no need to drop down to his level. In any case, whatever he says is nonsense." All the students advised, and deliberately disparaged Hu Yingmu so Ling Han would cool his temper. Yet Hu Yingmu had exploded in fury. He was really like a tiger that had gone down to level land. Even these damn little bugs dared to ridicule him? These idiots had completely no idea that he had already sent out news, and in a short few days, the ancestor from his clan would reach this place. By that time, wouldn't that so-called great saint only be suppressed? He turned around menacingly. "Brat, you really want to fight me?" He did not mind taking Ling Han down first. In that way, the secret technique of the Celestial King would definitely belong to him alone. He was sure that Ling Han had definitely cultivated a Celestial King technique. Otherwise, he could not possibly have such frightening defenses. In the face of such a secret technique. So what if he was one of his own clansmen? Even if he had his own descendants in future, it could not be passed down as easily as that. This was too precious. "Old man, you are too shameless." "That's right, a respected saint would actually challenge an eternal river tear. Why don't you just die?" Everyone laughed mockingly. They did not want Ling Han to accept the challenge at all. "Ling Han, enough," the Star Sand Saint said as well. At present, he was filled with a strong desire to preserve talent. No matter what sacrifices had to be made, he was determined to protect Ling Han. As long as this boy managed to become a saint, he would possess the strength that could allow him to conquer the whole world. Ling Han did not say anything, and instead began to channel that drop of blood essence from the Saint King. Hu Yingmu actually dared to have ideas about the Empress. He could not tolerate that. If the Star Sand Saint had killed Hu Yingmu, he naturally would not have stepped out aggressively. But it was apparent that the Star Sand Saint was wary. Then he'd just do it himself. Boom! Saintly might filled Ling Han's body. This was a drop of blood essence from a saint king deliberately left behind by the heavenly river king. It had lasted through eons, and could allow Ling Han to explode once. He could even become a match for a great saint. It would be enough to kill a small saint. What? Everyone was stunned. This was saintly might. It could not be more obvious. Golden light entwined around Ling Han's body, becoming multiple seals of great Tao. It was sacred, highest, as if the heavenly Tao itself had arrived. This was the saintly might of a saint king taking form. Pa 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 pa. All the common people knelt, and even those rank 3 king tiers like the second in the world and Zichun Feng were not exempted, either. There was nothing that could be done. This was the might of a saint king that stood above all. Those that could still remain standing were only those saints. Besides them, there was also the Empress, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and the large black dog. You have obtained the blood essence of a saint king, and it is a complete drop too. Huangmu paled in shock. This was the first time that he could feel how true the threat this man posed to him was. Ling Han's eyes were menacing. He did not say anything. This was merely a man that was about to die. You want to kill me in your dreams? Huangmu could only answer his own question. Our 8 stones forbidden land is strongest in prediction. Even if you flee to the corners of the world, your only fate will still be death. This was an indirect admission of his fear. Don't even think of killing me. Otherwise, you will not be able to escape either. This was what he was saying between the lines. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind. At the time, Wuxia and his group had actually managed to so coincidentally find them out because they had obtained guidance from the ancestor of their clan who had gained the information through prediction. But this ability of prediction obviously was still very inadequate. Otherwise, Wuxia and his group would not have died. This kind of ability could not be underestimated, but it was also definitely not omnipotent, either. Ling Han, think before you act. The Star Sand Saint did not advise him further, and merely reminded him. The present Ling Han was too strong. He could even equal him in power. Ling Han nodded and said, I have considered carefully. I am determined to stomp this damn bug to death. Fuck. Huangmu cursed internally, but did not dare to say a word. Instead, he turned around and fled. The man had channeled a drop of blood essence from a saint king, and his present abilities were enough to equal a great saint. How was he supposed to fight that? The precious robe he was wearing could only endure over 100 attacks, and would crumble after this limit was reached. Want to flee? Ling Han smirked. Since he had even used the blood essence of a saint king, how could he easily allow him to flee? He moved, and his hand was large enough to shadow the skies, grabbing out towards Huangmu. At this moment, Ling Han himself was a great saint. When a great saint moved, a small saint could not possibly dodge, and could only take the attack up front. It was just like how Ling Han could not possibly dodge Huangmu's attack previously. Boom, the precious robe glowed, and divine patterns shone brilliantly. This meant it had exploded with great might, and forcibly blocked Ling Han's attack. Ling Han naturally did not take it to heart. Though there was a time limit to the blood essence of a saint king, it was definitely enough time for him to send out not just 100 attacks. In other words, Huangmu was dead. To dare make a move to snatch his wife. Who would be dying if not him? Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han thrashed Huangmu so madly that he could only be beaten. Everyone was watching open-mouthed with shock, and recalled something that they had overlooked. In truth, Ling Han had no need to have the agreement of a single move with the other party, and could completely make a direct move to cripple him. Why had Ling Han taken such an indirect course then? That was because Ling Han wanted Huangmu to lower his head and apologize. Otherwise, for someone as proud as Huangmu, even if he was killed by Ling Han, how could he possibly open his mouth and admit his fault? This was working off his anger. First making you apologize, and then killing you. Senior brother Ling is formidable. Senior brother Ling is imperious. Senior brother Ling, I want to have your babies. Everyone's cries resounded together. A great many female disciples had forgotten to be reserved, and even Long Xiangyue very much wanted to shout as well. Ling Han moved continuously. With the support of the blood essence of a saint king, his power had reached an unimaginable level. His grasp of technique had not improved, but when power had reached a certain extent, that would naturally form suppression. Moreover, the blood essence of the Saint King also possessed the regulations on the level of Saint King, though Ling Han could not understand or freely control it. He could only blast it out in one attack after another. This could not be used for comprehension but could be used in battle. He was an honorable saint. Furthermore, he was one who had walked out from the Forbidden Land. Yet, he would actually be killed by a junior in the eternal river tier. Even if he was dead, this would mean eternal humiliation, and his name would be infamous in history. He tried his best to break out of the siege. Chapter 1536. He really killed him. Too bad. No matter how strong a small saint was, in front of a great saint, he was still just a small saint. Huingmu had not been gifted the blood essence of a Saint King. For a Saint King, this was also a massive loss, and would damage his life force. But he himself was a saint, and also had a precious robe that could dispel the attacks of even a great saint. In his eyes, it was enough to allow him to do as he liked in the immortal realm. However, he encountered a rash fool, who clearly knew how shocking his background was, yet was still determined to hold on to him. There was no need for this, right? Huingmu used all his effort to break through the siege, but in front of the present Ling Han, this was a completely impossible feat. The moment he rushed out, he would be smacked back by a massive hand that shadowed the skies. All his effort only ended up in him being dizzy. All the students watched with their hair on ends. This was planning to kill a saint. A saint was noble and highly revered. Even an elite like the Star Sand Saint did not dare to easily suppress the other small saints, because there was not much difference in the speed of saints. If one party was clearly trying to flee, the other party could only chase futilely from behind. The present situation was different. Who asked Huingmu to barge in on his own accord? This was equivalent to delivering himself up on a silver platter. If he still managed to flee like that, what justice would be left in this world? Didn't that mean that the Star Sand Saint could only watch on helplessly as any small saint came here and ran berserk? What a joke! Thus, at least in these 100 million years, it had never been heard that a saint had been killed. There were those that died of old age, but there was not one that had died in battle. But now, this exciting scene was about to play out. Killing a saint, and the one who would be killing a saint was an eternal river tier. Heavens! Huingmu had gone crazy. He did not hold back from burning his own life force. Otherwise, he would definitely be dead. By this time, even if he did not want to, he had to put his life on the line. But so what if a small saint burned his own life force? He was still incapable of matching the battle prowess of a great saint. "Ah!" he cried out, having an arm forcefully ripped off. "Ugh!" he groaned as a large hole appeared in his chest. Hiss! He frowned as his back suffered a palm strike. Even his heart had been crushed. Even so, he could still fight. The vitality of a saint was sturdy. In fact, there was not much effect on his battle prowess. When one had reached the height he had reached, what was important was using the regulations of heaven and earth. As long as his spirit was not destroyed, it could be claimed that his battle prowess would be maintained at prime condition. However, a spirit was established on a physical body. Without a physical shell, a spirit would only be a weed that had lost its roots. Thus, as long as Huingmu's physical body was destroyed, his spirit would be exposed. By then it would be too easy to kill him. But right at this moment, Ling Han's aura suddenly declined. Huingmu was first stunned, then became overjoyed. The blood essence of a Saint King in Ling Han was about to be fully consumed. He only had to last for a while longer, and would be able to survive this crisis. Ha 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 ha! He laughed madly. A mere eternal river tier and you still want to kill a saint? That would only happen in your dreams. This was what a saint was. Even if Ling Han possessed a drop of blood essence of a Saint King, he would not be able to kill a saint, either. It was too difficult. Is that so? Ling Han smirked coldly, and drew the divine demon sword. Pooh, he stabbed it into Huingmu's body. The basis of your confidence is only a drop of Saint King blood essence. Once the saintly blood is consumed, you are nothing in front of me. Huingmu scoffed. An ant will always be an ant. Even if you wear an imperial robe, you will still be a piece of trash. You. He suddenly paled in shock. A frightening murderous aura was bubbling inside his body, and instantly destroyed his life force completely. Why was it like this? He hurriedly had his spirit leave his body. Even if he had to discard this body, he would not hold back. At least he could secure his life. As long as his spirit was still present, he could still make a comeback. However, it was too late. The divine demon sword had been forged from divine metal, and having this kind of powerful weapon stab into his body, especially into a vital point, would definitely mean death. Hu Yingmu's spirit had indeed left his body, but the murderous aura had already infected his spirit. It was endlessly eroding his spirit as if it was being weathered away. In an instant, it degenerated. No! A sharp howl rang out from his spirit and echoed in everyone's mind. This was only a short instant. Hu Yingmu's spirit had disappeared, and he was completely dead. A saint had thus vanished. Quang! A sudden clap of thunder sounded in the skies, and a shower of blood rained down. A saint had died, and gave rise to a lament from the heavens. From a certain aspect, a saint represented the heaven and earth. When a saint died, the heaven and earth would grieve. Everyone was dumbfounded. He had really killed a saint. Something that definitely was impossible to happen had really truly happened. Heavens! This definitely was the largest miracle in history. An eternal river tier had killed a saint, and he wasn't even in the pinnacle level of the eternal river tier. That was a level that theoretically couldn't manage to kill a saint. After persisting for 30 minutes, the rain of blood finally stopped. The dark clouds dispersed, and the thunder stopped. Everything returned to normal. Ling Han turned around and walked back. The divine light on his body had already weakened greatly, but the eyes everyone looked at him with were still filled with reverence. Follow me. The Star Sand Saint curled out a hand, and brought Ling Han back to the ancient academy. He did not even call the 9 small saints with him. Zhu Xiu'er was surprised, fearful, and filled with hatred simultaneously. This naturally scared her to death, but the Star Sand Saint had completely ignored her bitter experience, which made her extremely furious. I am your wife here, your son's mother. Ling Han and the Star Sand Saint conversed secretly for close to a day, and only then did he return. He immediately called his 2 wives over, and made his preparations to leave the wood figure planet. On this day, he asked the Star Sand Saint a great many questions, especially concerning the field of prediction. He found out that when one had entered Saint King level, elites truly would possess that kind of ability. However, it was very vague, and only those Saint Kings that were focused on studying this area could become highly accurate. Unfortunately, that ancestor from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land should be that kind of Saint King. Hu Yingmu had died, and in a few days, this ancestor would charge over here. Thus, Ling Han had to leave, and the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy would also put up an act and order the arrest of Ling Han. It was not just the Myriad Directions galaxy that he could not stay. He could not even go to the surrounding galaxies. The prediction of a Saint King was not omnipotent. The nearer he was, the more accurate the prediction would be, and the farther he was, the more vague it would be. He had to immediately leave. Saints could travel through tearing a rip into space, and were even faster than the cloud-piercing shuttle. If he didn't leave now, it would be too late. Ling Han asked the opinions of the Rain Emperor and the others. They all expressed the wish to remain. There were many king tiers here, and competing with them could allow them to advance their cultivation level at a faster pace. Ling Han left behind a large number of leaves from the reincarnation tree, as well as a great many top-grade god tools and saintly material which he allowed the Rain Emperor and the others to freely choose from. Chapter 1537 The Hunt Begins. The Star Sand Saint appeared at the first moment, and the instant he saw the visitor, he looked shocked. This was a supreme elite, the air of primal chaos entwined all over his body. Even he could not clearly distinguish his features, and could only judge by his voice that this man should be very, very old. And beside this man, there was another young man, who similarly was a saint. However, he was too young. At most, he couldn't be more than 100,000 years old. In fact, it was possible that he was only 10,000 to 20,000 years old. The Star Sand Saint was incredibly surprised. A saint who was only 10,000 to 20,000 years old. Even if he was a prodigy, these 10,000 to 20,000 years would only be enough for him to attain the Sun-Moon tier. right? But the person in front of him was a saint. Though he was only supposed to be a sun-moon tier, he had already reached the most crucial step into the saint tier. Greetings, senior. The Star Sand Saint bowed towards that supreme elite. This indeed was a saint king, an existence that even he could only look up to. This elite was an ancestor of the Hu clan, a truly mighty figure, and a being that was on the level of the master of the whole immortal realm. His name was Hu Luo, and had reached Tao 30 billion years ago. Though he had lived for so many years, he could still live on for another 10 billion years or so, and could see who knew how many elites being replaced by newer generations. Saint King Hu Luo glanced at the Star Sand Saint. His expression could not be seen, but a person that had come out from a forbidden land had to be incredibly prideful. What more when he was a Saint King, a truly invincible existence in the entire immortal realm. He did not speak, and instead turned to look at the young man beside him. This young saint broke into a smile, as warm as a spring breeze, but he radiated a bone-deep coldness that was like ice. That was a kind of pride that was not apparent from the surface. In truth, this kind of person was truly the most arrogant. Their condescension of others was bone-deep. I am Hu Feng, he introduced himself. How should I address you, sir? Mi Yuan, the Star Sand Saint replied. If this was another setting, he naturally did not have to bother with a small saint, but now, this small saint was the representative of a saint king. He had to be polite. Lord Mi. Hu Feng bowed again, and then said, recently, a senior from my clan has disappeared. Going by the prediction of my clan ancestor, this grandfather of mine should have died here. Does Lord Mi know who was his murderer? The Star Sand Saint couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Though Hu Feng had been polite, every word was sharp. He was asking him if he was the murderer. Wasn't that very obvious? In this place, there was no other great saint besides you, so who else could kill a small saint? Thankfully, the Star Sand Saint had prepared himself and replied, Indeed, I do know. This person's name is Ling Han. Oh, please clearly talk about the background of this man, Hu Feng said calmly, but a sliver of killing intent was already seeping from his eyes. This person was originally a student of my academy, and had just broken through to the Eternal River tier recently. Lord Mi, don't tell me that grandfather of mine has been killed by an Eternal River tier? Hu Feng interrupted his words, a mocking smile appearing on his face. Even if you wanted to lie, you had to make up a believable excuse, right? An Eternal River tier killing a saint. Why weren't you claiming that pigs could fly while you were at it? The Star Sand Saint continued, that is indeed the case, because Ling Han possessed a drop of Saint King blood essence. He also related the matter of the 3 Phoenix Kings pulling a war chariot. Though he had restrained himself very much, the urgency in his tone could still be heard. Hu Feng was surprised, but he immediately recalled something. Suddenly, he, too, became excited. The Star Sand Saint hid nothing, and explained the whole matter. Hu Luo's hands formed a strange divine seal. Streaks of divine light glimmered, and multiple seals appeared behind him. His whole person had become abstract. He was clearly standing there, yet it seemed as if he did not exist at all, which was incredibly bizarre. The Star Sand Saint knew that this was the other merging with the great Tao of the heaven and earth. He was making a prediction. After a while, Saint King Hu Luo finally stopped. The air of primal chaos on his face lessened considerably, and an aged face could be seen. In fact, there were even a few drops of sweat. He nodded at Hu Feng and said, the matter should be more or less like that. You must immediately set out and hunt down this despicable boy. He transmitted the message through divine sense, so only Hu Feng could hear it. The treasure left behind by the Heavenly River King has serious implications. If I left the Forbidden Land for too long, it would definitely draw the suspicion of the other Forbidden Lands. Hence, I will delegate this matter to you. Yes, ancestor. Hu Feng respectfully obeyed. Saint King Hu Luo bore a deep fondness for this junior. This was the future hope of the Hu clan. He had entered into the saint tier after merely cultivating for 13,000 years, which was the first in the history of the Hu clan. Thus, it was inevitable that he would be a little bit long-winded. This boy killed Ingmu, and has thus established a relation of karma with our Hu clan. With your abilities, it would not be difficult for you to predict the other's whereabouts. I will gift you a drop of blood essence as well, just in case. Hu Luo condensed a drop of Saint King blood essence and handed it to Hu Feng. For him, this was also an extremely great loss. He had to immediately return to the Forbidden Land to rest. Otherwise, it would affect his lifespan. Furthermore, he was about to experience the immortal tribulation soon. If he was not in his prime condition, it was highly possible that he could be severed by the heaven and earth. If it was not due to the fact that the treasure trove of the Heavenly River King was too important, he naturally would not undergo such a massive loss. Unfortunately, he could not personally commence pursuit. What if that drew the suspicion of the other Forbidden Lands? Then it was possible that the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would be like how the Heavenly River King had been, and become the target of their combined forces. I understand. Hu Feng nodded. He, too, formed a seal to predict, and soon focused his gaze on one corner of the galaxy. Suddenly, a golden path stretched out beneath his feet. In merely a single step, he had already traveled a boundless distance. Saint King Hu Luo looked at the Star Sand Saint and calmly stated, "Your disciple killed my clansman. What do you think should be done?" This meant that he was asking for compensation. The Star Sand Saint hurriedly answered, "This junior is willing to make up for it." Saint King Hu Luo nodded. He would only stay for 1 to 2 days, and would then have to return to the Forbidden Land. He was not the only person that knew how to make a prediction. If he stayed outside for too long, and another person decided to make a prediction on a whim, that kind of result was something he could not accept. His eyes focused on the galaxy, and revealed a strong hint of anticipation. He was filled with confidence in Hu Feng. This junior would definitely settle the matter well. Ling Han steered the cloud-piercing shuttle, traveling through the galaxy, and aiming straight for the Cloud Apex planet. But after a mere 2 days, a golden pathway stretched over from the depths of the universe, and quickly surpassed the cloud-piercing shuttle. A figure flashed, and a young man had already appeared on the golden pathway, blocking the course of the cloud-piercing shuttle. "Please stop for a moment. I would like to ask some questions." This young man wore a warm smile as if he was greeting an old friend. Chapter 1538 A Torrent of Abuse. This was very strange. In the desolate and cold galaxy, a man stood in your path and hailed you down for a chat like he was your next-door neighbor. But this was the galaxy here. A saint from the Hu clan, Ling Han immediately confirmed internally. Aside from this Forbidden Land that was expert in prediction, he did not offend any other saints. If it was claimed that it just coincidentally happened to be some other saint that had stopped him in his path on a paltry whim, he truly would not believe that. He exited the cloud-piercing shuttle, and put the cloud-piercing shuttle away into the black tower with a wave of his right hand. Then he looked at that young man. This man was really frighteningly young. His brimming vitality could not be faked. He was filled with youthful energy that seemed like it could tear a hole into the skies. "From the 8 Stones Forbidden Land?" Ling Han asked. Since he had come to hunt him down, there was naturally no need for him to be polite. He very much despised this kind of hypocritical and murderous character. This young man naturally was Hu Feng. He was still smiling. With the lofty position of a saint, especially one that had walked out from a forbidden land, he naturally would not take to heart the resistance of a mere ant. However world-shakingly you were cursing, what person would take the mad chirping of a bird outside his window seriously? He broke into a smile and said, "Since you know that I have come from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, you must be the one I am looking for." He paused and continued, "My name is Hu Feng. You may address me directly by my name." This was really humility to a certain extent. A high and noble saint actually allowed an eternal river-tier to address him directly by name. Just how amiable was he? It was too deliberate. What a fake. Ling Han shook his head internally. If the large black dog was here, he definitely would have innumerable negative and derisive words to spout. Too bad, this damn dog was glad to be in his proper surroundings in the academy, and simply did not leave with him. Of course, Ling Han did not want to bring it along, either. Wasn't that just looking for his own discomfort? Ling Han smiled as well, and said, "My name is Ling Han. You too can address me directly by name." When Hu Feng heard this, a muscle involuntarily twitched in his cheek. He was a saint, and if he allowed others to address him directly, that was him being humble and amiable. But even an eternal river tier like you dared act like that? Fuck. I gave you an inch, and you plan to take a mile. His tone darkened as he said, You killed a member of our Hu clan, and you think you can flee? Ling Han smiled instead, and said, I will try my best, and will absolutely not disappoint your expectations. Hu Feng felt another muscle twitch in his cheek again. Those words from him were naturally filled with sarcasm. Yet Ling Han actually answered him directly. You think I hope that you can flee? Then what kind of trash would a saint like me be, not being capable of apprehending even an eternal river tier? He was only wary that Ling Han still possessed the Saint King blood essence. Though he was sure that the latter should only have a single drop, and had already used it, it was best to be sure. He was a very careful person. There was no rush to make a move. Without the Saint King blood essence, where could he flee to? Just use whatever tricks you have, Hu Feng stated calmly. Ling Han had very sharp senses, and added with the fact that he had spent a long period of time with such great caustic characters like the large black dog, the old ginseng, and the rabbit. He was expertly skilled at grasping the hearts of others. He laughed and said, Though you put on a very amiable act, you are actually testing out the waters to see if I still have any Saint King blood essence. If I didn't, you would probably immediately turn hostile, right? He had hit the nail on the head. Hu Feng's expression did not change. He still had that level of subtlety in him. Though he had been cultivating in the last millennia and more, he was naturally extremely intelligent and very strong in self-discipline to be able to advance into the saint tier so quickly. He chuckled and replied, You are but a mere eternal river tier. What right do you have to act insolent in front of me? Tisk, TSK, TSK. Ling Han shook his head. If I have to be honest, you are simply cheap. Your own clan senior has been killed by my hand, and you still act so friendly. Fuck, I have never seen trash like you. If you had been my grandson, I would have broken your wretched leg a long time ago. This. Hu Feng was dumbfounded. This ant actually dared to hurl abuse at him. Cheap, trash, wretched leg? No matter how well he could act, he would not be able to tolerate that. If he could still bear having someone point directly at his nose and throw insults at him, wouldn't he be a tortoise? How dare you? Finally, he could not hold back from moving. Even his expression was slightly twisted in livid fury. If anyone from the 8 Stones Forbidden Land was here, they definitely would be filled with disbelief. That was because Hu Feng had lacked youthful temper since childhood, and had been called an immovable boulder. Even if the heavens collapsed in front of him, his expression would not change. When they had been playing when they were children, even if someone had snatched his toy away, he would not even cry or make a fuss. But now, even the boulder had been angered, and lost all his composure. This was practically unimaginable. As the saying goes, one would be the product of his environment. Who were those beside Ling Han? They were beings like the large black dog, the old ginseng, and the rabbit. If one stayed long enough with them, and they were really intent on angering you, they definitely were capable of driving you to mad fury. Ling Han had already channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Boom, when this strike landed, he was sent flying thousands of miles away. The galaxy did not form any kind of resistance for him. If he had not taken the initiative to stop, he could continue to fly all the way, and would only stop when he crashed into some meteor or star. Hu Feng was involuntarily stunned. This man actually managed to endure a blow from him. This was nature-defying. The Star Sand Saint had only said that Ling Han killed Hu Yingmu by channeling a drop of Star Sand Saint King blood essence, and concealed that wager that had been previously made. Thus, neither Hu Feng nor Hu Yingmu knew what terrifying height Ling Han's defenses could attain. This definitely was not the might of a tool, but the ability of this person himself. What kind of cultivation technique was this? Hu Feng's eyes abruptly lit up. As the prodigy of a forbidden land, he naturally knew a great turmoil had 8 Stones tribe leaving the celestial realm. But in comparison, the 8 Stones tribe could not be considered as top tier among those forces that had been exiled. It was said that there were even celestial kings that had died in that kind of war. The Heavenly River King had obtained this kind of inheritance, and that was why he managed to rise up in such a short period of time, and became able to challenge the Forbidden Lands. This brat had to have obtained the treasures that the Heavenly River King had left behind. In fact, He had already successfully cultivated the techniques from within. Otherwise, how could he possibly be capable of blocking the blow from a saint? Immediately, his greed blazed. He made another move, and grabbed out at Ling Han. Ling Han could not dodge, and could only channel the indestructible heaven scroll to endure another strike. Boom, golden light emanated from his whole body, and he was like an undefeatable war god. He again successfully blocked this blow. He gritted his teeth internally. This Hu Feng was even more powerful than Hu Yingmu. He had only suffered 2 blows, and the origin power inside his body was already completely exhausted. He laughed loudly. Going by the look of things, I may not be able to take a full power blow from a great saint. Ling Han sighed. The so-called strike from a saint was only limited to a medium saint. The heavenly body tier corresponded to a small saint, whereas the eternal river tier corresponded to medium saint. If that kind of complaint was heard by others, they would definitely be strangling him in fury. Fuck, aside from a freak like you, what eternal river tier in this whole world could survive a blow from a saint? A golden pathway immediately appeared, and went off in pursuit of the cloud-piercing shuttle. The speed of it was even faster. A saint had comprehended the highest level of regulations of the heaven and earth, and it could be claimed that they were one with the heaven and earth. Only saints could compete in speed with another saint. Xiao, in only 3 steps, Hu Feng had already caught up, but when he stretched out a hand to capture the cloud-piercing shuttle, he only caught empty air. It had vanished again, the vessel and the passenger together. Hu Feng felt a little driven mad. It was clear that the precious treasure was right in front of him, and the one who possessed it was merely in the low extreme of the eternal river tier. He obviously should be able to capture him just by stretching out his hand, yet why did he keep failing to do so? This time, he simply sat down in a cross-legged position right then and there, and waited. After a while, the cloud-piercing shuttle again appeared, yet it was a few hundred miles away. The strike he had sent out just now had given rise to a wave in the galaxy, and the black tower went with the flow, so it naturally floated very far away. A golden pathway stretched out, and Hu Feng once again pursued, but when he caught up with it, the cloud-piercing shuttle had naturally vanished again. Ah! He roared in fury, and only felt incredibly sullen. He was an honorable saint that could overturn the seas and rivers with a single thought. A full power attack from him, and even a heavenly body tier would be shattered, yet he was actually unable to apprehend someone who was only in the low extreme of the eternal river tier all this while. Within the black tower. What are you calling out for? I am also feeling very depressed, Ling Han muttered in displeasure. Becoming the target of a saint, he could only creep around like a snail. Going by this trend, when would he reach Cloud Apex Planet? There was nothing to be done. Hu Feng presently was like a shark that had smelt blood, and would definitely keep chasing after him relentlessly. Fine then. With a saint targeting me, this pressure is heavy enough, Ling Han thought optimistically. After a day of rest, his origin power had recovered, and he exited the Black Tower again. When Hu Feng caught up with him, he chose to confront the latter. After a consecutive 2 times, he hid once more into the Black Tower. Ling Han panted heavily. They both are small saints, yet the gap is truly big. I am sure that this Hu Feng would be able to defeat the Tranquil Heart Saint and the other saints within 100 moves. However, having a saint pounding me into shape, my origin power has become increasingly compact, and this is indirectly improving my abilities. If this was another person, this definitely would be seeking death, but Ling Han was different. He had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, and was like a supreme divine metal. The more he was pressured and hammered, the sturdier he would become. Of course, the precondition was that it did not exceed his limits. Otherwise that would really be seeking death. And in this way, Ling Han would fight up front with Hu Feng twice a day, and after every battle, he would experience some level of comprehension. What eternal river tier could genuinely spar with a saint every day? Putting aside the question of whether you could or not, what saint would have so much free time on their hands? The present situation was unique, and Hu Feng had become Ling Han's best sparring partner. After a month had passed, Ling Han actually managed to successfully endure 3 moves from Hu Feng. Though he only managed to recover his injuries with the direct use of a drop of indestructible true fluid after this one move, it proved that Ling Han had obtained massive improvement a month ago. It was definitely impossible for him to take 3 moves from Hu Feng. This caused Hu Feng extreme shock. That rate of improvement was really too frightening. Could it be that he would be personally bringing a monster into existence? But it was impossible for him to simply turn around and leave. A Celestial King technique, a Celestial tool. Whichever of these 2 items was not something that he could simply give up. Even if he had to chase him to the corners of the universe, he was determined to apprehend Ling Han. In any case, the latter had killed a member of the Hu clan, and formed a relation of karma with them. No matter where he fled to, it would be useless. He would be able to find him. Another 3 months passed, and Ling Han could already calmly take 3 moves from Hu Feng. Furthermore, he had also formed the final heavenly body, and reached the true peak stage of the low extreme. On this day, he did not come out to fight with Hu Feng again. Instead, he went into isolation underneath the reincarnation tree to break through to the medium extreme. He could give up whenever he wanted, but Hu Feng had to be completely focused. His divine sense was tense the whole day, and remained like that for a continuous several months. Even if he was a saint, he was still slightly tired. But the biggest problem here was that Ling Han had actually not appeared for a whole month's time, which made him feel even worse. Chapter 1540 Enduring the Heavenly Tribulation, Scaring You to Death. On one hand, Hu Feng did not dare to relax at all, because it was possible that Ling Han could appear at any time. The initiative was in his hands. On the other, Ling Han's disappearance caused him to feel anxious. Could it be that he had used some other method and fled? The moment this thought came to him, he was burning with anxiety. Thankfully, he knew how to predict. Ling Han had killed Hu Yingmu, and thus formed a relation of karma with the Hu Yingmu. It was so strong that even if there were a few hundred galaxies separating them, he could easily see the link of karma between them. However, the moment Ling Han vanished, the link of karma would also disappear with him, which was incredibly strange. Vanishing means that he is still in the celestial tool. I can still stand guard here and wait for him to reappear, he said to himself, forcibly suppressing his unease. Though he was a saint, the time since he had formed his Tao was much too short. In terms of calmness, he naturally could not compare to the experienced veteran saints. If it was Hu Luo, he would definitely not have any self-doubt, because he was sure that he was the strongest in the world, and no matter what Ling Han did, he would never be able to escape from his grasp. Just when his worry became more and more serious, Wang, an air of instability was sensed. Ling Han had finally reappeared. Ha ha ha. Hu Feng laughed loudly. His heavy mood immediately vanished. With a step, he was already rushing towards Ling Han. Are you sure you want to do that? Ling Han broke into a strange smile. Pang! He had taken a strike from Hu Feng head-on, and slid back a few hundred miles, yet a mass of dark clouds appeared in the galaxy in an incredibly strange manner, and shrouded the skies above his head. Hu Feng suddenly stopped. Heavenly tribulation. Hiss, this guy went off into isolation for a month, so he had been breaking through to the medium extreme. Hu Feng was really shocked. He had unlocked the barrier to the medium extreme of the eternal river tier in merely 1 month. Was he even human? No. He could not allow this man to grow even further. Otherwise, this guy's ability to resist blows would become more and more frightening, and his cultivation level would also become higher and higher. Perhaps one day he truly would become a match for him. No matter the cost, he had to be killed. His eyes turned cold, and he suddenly came to a decision. He would kill Ling Han in the midst of the heavenly tribulation. Though this would pull him into the heavenly tribulation as well, he had a drop of Saint King blood essence, which could allow him to possess the abilities of a great saint at his peak for a short period of time. Even with that, would he still be incapable of surviving the heavenly tribulation? He was going to do it. If he did not take this chance, Ling Han would become harder and harder to kill. Die! He forcibly charged into the area enshrouded by the heavenly tribulation, and blasted out a punch at Ling Han. He wanted to kill Ling Han. As for the treasures, he could simply search his soul. There was no need for him to be alive for that. Ling Han broke into a grin and mumbled, You are the one who asked for this. He channeled the indestructible heaven scroll and took another blow from Hu Feng, and in this manner, tribulation clouds also appeared above Hu Feng's head. Quang! Lightning bolts stuck down. The heavenly tribulation was not going to care, and was only intent on eliminating the person undergoing the heavenly tribulation. Ling Han was unafraid. His godly bones were about to reach level 15, and he had also inscribed level 15 killing formations. Did he have to be afraid of heavenly tribulation that was merely in medium extreme level? However, he did not dare to shatter his godly bones now to undergo tempering by the heavenly tribulation. After all, there was a saint glaring at him like he was his prey. But this time, Hu Feng himself was also being attacked by the heavenly tribulation. Lightning bolts fell quickly. They were 30,000 meters wide, and who knew how many 100 million miles they were long. What he had to undergo was naturally the heavenly tribulation of a saint. Furthermore, due to Ling Han's strength, his heavenly tribulation would be considerably more frightening than any ordinary heavenly tribulation. Hu Feng forcibly interfered, so the heavenly tribulation he had to undergo would be further magnified on the basis of Ling Han's own heavenly tribulation. It would definitely be more frightening than the ordinary heavenly tribulation of other saints. Hu Feng's face immediately paled. It was not that he had not undergone the saintly tribulation before, but compared to this, it was far too inferior. Though his abilities had indeed considerably improved since that time, his improvement definitely was not that drastic. It was that brat. Hu Feng was shocked. Actually, the heavenly tribulation was the best proof of the potential that a cultivator had. When two heavenly tribulations were similarly on the level of the medium extreme of the eternal river tier, and mine was fiercer than yours, it clearly showed that the heaven and earth admitted that I posed a bigger threat, and it naturally proved that I was stronger. He wanted to kill Ling Han at all costs, but the frightening lightning was already descending like a torrential gale. He could only use his full power to parry the striking lightning bolts. Though this heavenly tribulation was frightening, he was sure that he was completely capable of safely enduring it. There was no need for him to use the Saint King blood essence. He had been guarding against the possibility that Ling Han might possess another drop of Saint King blood essence. Perhaps this was a trap that Ling Han had laid out for him, forcing him to use the Saint King blood essence. Ling Han could turn the tables around and hunt him down next. This was his trump card. He definitely could not use it outside of a crucial time that meant life or death. Thus, Hu Feng could no longer bother with attacking Ling Han, and focused his full concentration on receiving the heavenly tribulation. Very soon he was stunned. Ling Han broke apart, and became multiple pieces. This! He was sure that it was definitely not the heavenly tribulation that struck Ling Han to pieces. Instead, he had taken the initiative to shatter his own godly bones. This was allowing his body to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation. Freak! Hu Feng suddenly could not accept this. He had never seen anyone undergo the heavenly tribulation in such a flamboyant manner. How were others supposed to endure this? Everyone had to prepare a good many years, and ensure that they had complete confidence before they would undergo the heavenly tribulation, but a great number of people would still die because of the heavenly tribulation. And what about him? He just carelessly underwent the heavenly tribulation, and was even tempering his godly bones like he was simply sunbathing. This was a terrible danger. Hu Feng's heart was trembling violently. If Ling Han was allowed to escape this time, then the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would face a massive problem. If Ling Han became a saint one day, he would definitely be the nightmare of all the saints in the world. That kind of man, was it even possible to kill him? He gritted his teeth, and decided to use the Saint King blood essence. He would kill Ling Han at all costs. Quang! The divine lightning fell like rain, completely submerging him. This tribulation was becoming more and more terrifying. Damn it! Hu Feng cursed internally, and had no choice but to diffuse that drop of Saint King blood essence. Otherwise, it was really possible that he would be turned into nothing under the barrage of the heavenly tribulation. The heavenly tribulation did not care for the fact that a saint like him represented the willpower of the heavenly tribulation. This was a blade in itself, only possessing the intent to kill. Break! Hu Feng sent out a punch into the skies. At this moment, the might of a Saint King spread out. He possessed the strength of a great saint, and even a heavenly tribulation was no match for him. But it was as if the heavenly tribulation had been angered. When the next bolt of lightning fell, it actually took the form of a human figure formed with lightning, rapidly blasting towards him. Hu Feng shouted in fury, yet could not ignore this. Otherwise, if he was hit by the heavenly tribulation, it was possible that a wound to his great Tao would be left on him, and it could be considered that he was done for in this lifetime. Even if the lightning figure was no match for Hu Feng, and crumbled with a single strike, the heavenly tribulation was not a living being. Very soon, lightning reformed and again took the form of a human figure, continuing its barrage of attacks on Hu Feng. Everyone knew that it was impossible for a heavenly tribulation to be dispelled. One could only endure and bear it until half a day passed, and it would be fine. Hu Feng was tightly entangled with the lightning figure. Though his abilities were obviously stronger, the lightning figure was immortal. This vexed him deeply as he could not throw the latter off his tail at all. Ling Han did not need the whole half-day's time to hammer his godly bones. About 4 hours were enough. He channeled a drop of indestructible true fluid, and his shattered bones immediately rejoined. He was completely unhurt, and his vitality was even stronger than before. He stood proudly like that in the empty void, raising his head to look at the heavenly tribulation. Allowing the heavenly tribulation to blast him, he observed and experienced the heavenly tribulation. That kind of calmness compared to Hu Feng's own sorry state made Hu Feng feel an even more explosive fury. Chapter 1541 decided. Going to the netherworld. Hu Feng had enough reason to go crazy. He had already used a drop of Saint King blood essence, but not only was he unable to apprehend Ling Han, he actually did not look as calm as the latter, who asked him to be strong in attack, but weak in physique. The heavenly tribulation was extremely fast, and could only be blocked and not dodged. This decided that no matter how strong you were, you could only stay in a defensive position and submit to its barrage, which meant that his trait of being strong in attack was of completely no use here. Half a day passed. Without a word, Ling Han threw out the cloud-piercing shuttle and fled. Hu Feng was still undergoing the heavenly tribulation. He still had the end to undergo, and the Saint King blood essence was also completely consumed. He could only bear it head-on with his own abilities, which caused him to suffer very heavy injuries. When the heavenly tribulation dispersed, he sat down in a cross-legged position at the first instant. He had to heal his injuries. Otherwise, if he traveled with this kind of injury, it would leave behind a massive weakness for him. Ling Han had to die, but it did not mean that Hu Feng would have to throw his life into the bargain as well. Ling Han turned around to take a look, and then turned back round indifferently. The Heavenly River King was enemies with the 8 Stones Forbidden Land, but even the Heavenly River King did not request that he destroy the Forbidden Lands. He was only requested to kill the traitor, the Open Clouds King. However, having Hu Feng hunting him down all this way, Ling Han's temper was naturally stoked. He could ignore the other Forbidden Lands, but he was definitely going to raze the 8 Stones Forbidden Land to the ground. Fuck, who did they think they were? Steering the cloud-piercing shuttle, he headed rapidly in the direction of Cloud Apex Planet. Why was he going to Cloud Apex Planet? Could it be that there was someone there that could match a saint? Of course not. Ling Han was aiming to travel to the Two-Realm battlefield. Indeed, he was going to travel through the Two-Realm battlefield and enter into the netherworld. This was the final conclusion he had reached after his discussion with the Star Sand Saint. As long as he was in the immortal realm, Ling Han would be forever hunted by the 8 Stones Forbidden Land. What logic was it for him to stay on guard constantly against them? Thus, Ling Han wanted to go to the netherworld. The netherworld had different regulations from the immortal realm. Even if saints went there, they would only have the power of a saint there, and would not be able to channel the corresponding regulations. Thus, as long as he entered into the netherworld, the 8 Stones Forbidden Land would not be able to predict his whereabouts. And Ling Han had obtained the demonic power source, which could allow him to perfectly fit into the netherworld. There was absolutely no need to worry that he would encounter the combined attacks of the cultivators from the netherworld. Additionally, Ling Han was actually not too far from the saint tier. He should also consider fusing the regulations of the 2 realms to reach a higher peak. Then he should use this event as an opportunity to set off on his travels to the netherworld. When I return, I will definitely destroy you all, Ling Han muttered in displeasure. In any case, The galactic coordinates had already been set, so he simply entered into the Black Tower. In this manner, even if Hu Feng recovered from his injuries, he would not be able to predict his whereabouts. At most, he could only find his current location. He began to inscribe new formation patterns on his godly bones. Before leaving, he had prepared himself adequately. Naturally, he had long since chosen a level 16 killing formation. Limitless 9 Deaths formation. Among level 16 killing formations, it ranked number 1. Too bad, he did not have any Saint grade formation in his possession. Without reaching Saint tier, there was no way for him to practice such formations. Even if he forcibly inscribed the formation patterns, it would be useless. He would not be able to draw on the resonance with the power of the heaven and earth, and release its true might from that. He would just have to deal with it when he reached that point. Underneath the reincarnation tree, Ling Han earnestly cultivated. After spending close to a whole year, he finally comprehended the formation fully, and then began to inscribe the formation patterns on his godly bones. 1, 2, 3. The Limitless 9 Deaths formation had a total of 1080 formation patterns, and even one in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier would not be able to inscribe this formation in his body. Firstly, there were too many variables at play, and it would be difficult to control it. Secondly, his body would not be able to bear it. Before the killing formation killed others, it would wound the user first. This was practically self-torture. However, Ling Han was different. The reincarnation tree had given him enough time for comprehension, and the indestructible heaven scroll allowed him to have sturdy godly bones, which enabled him to accomplish a grand feat that others could not possibly accomplish. He merely used 21 days, and inscribed 11 limitless 9 deaths formations in his body. 11, not 10. The 9 heavens flame had become stronger and stronger. Thus, it allowed him to inscribe formation patterns on his godly bones with even thinner brush strokes. Hence, even though the limitless 9 deaths formation had higher requirements, Ling Han still inscribed even more killing formations than before. If it had been the blood crow formation at present, he probably should have been able to inscribe 20-odd such formations. After such a long time, the cloud-piercing shuttle naturally had long arrived at Cloud Apex Planet. It sank to the bottom of an ocean. Ling Han, the Empress, and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden exited the Black Tower, stored the cloud-piercing shuttle away, and headed towards the two-realm battlefield. Close to 2 years had passed, and the two women had also made much improvement. Needless to say, the Empress with her supreme divine fetus, which was even more awesome than Gu Daoi's had been, had advanced another step further in less than 2 years. She had already arrived at the late stage of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, and further enlarged the distance between her and Ling Han. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was not outdone, either. In future, her accomplishments would definitely be incapable of comparing to a divine fetus, but now that she had gained the inheritance of 3 Saint Kings, her bloodline had been greatly improved. She, too, had advanced into the peak stage of the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier. We have to rush. That maniac should catch up in a few days, Ling Han said. The two women nodded. At the same time, in the far-off galaxy, Hu Feng, who was presently sitting in a cross-legged position, suddenly opened his eyes. He could see the link of karma again. However, after being washed by the heavenly tribulation, this link of karma had already become extremely pale. It would probably completely vanish if Ling Han underwent another heavenly tribulation. Enduring the heavenly tribulation meant being reborn, a complete transformation, so it naturally would wash away one's previous karma. There was nowhere for him to run. Hu Feng took a step. The golden pathway stretched out, and quickly rushed in the direction of Cloud Apex Planet. The journey would take 4 days. He had calculated it. Ling Han and his group were traveling towards the two-realm battlefield. After advancing into the Eternal River tier, their speed was naturally shocking. In merely 1 day, they had once more returned to this place. In this place, they had left behind many memories, and the strongest was naturally Ding Zizhen, who had spent who knew how many 100 million years to lay out a fatal trap to revive his daughter. But in the end, his daughter had immediately committed suicide right after she had been revived. Let's go see the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, Ling Han suggested. She had taken much care of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. However, to avoid dragging the Purple Moon Divine Maiden into this matter as well, Ling Han did not accompany the other two. Instead, he had the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and Empress Luan Xing go together. Aside from that, he had long since refined the level 15 divine pill that the Purple Moon Divine Maiden had requested, and he brought it along with him. This was considered repayment for her favor. The favor was repaid, but it did not mean they were no longer friends. If the Purple Moon Divine Maiden was in trouble, Ling Han would still be willing to lend a helping hand. The two women did not dare to take too much time, and returned after only taking 4 hours. Lady Purple Moon told me to thank you on her behalf, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said. Ling Han being so serious about this matter was naturally because she was involved, and this made her feel a sweetness rise up in her heart. Meanwhile, Ling Han leaned close to her ear and whispered, "Then shall we unlock a new position tonight?" The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden rolled her eyes at him. This bad guy kept thinking of new ways to play with her. Wasn't she just slightly fierce to him in the past? Why did he have to keep remembering it and keep it in mind constantly? He was really petty. However, the moment she turned around, she lowered her head slightly, a rosy blush coloring her cheeks, and nodded almost indiscernibly. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Chapter 1542 First arrived. Ling Han and his group did not waste any time. They entered into the two-realm battlefield, and headed in the direction of the Netherworld. Ling Han was not the only one. Both Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden aimed to enter into the Celestial Realm, so they naturally could not simply aim for becoming saints. Thus, the two women also had to enter into the Netherworld to experience the different regulations of the heaven and earth. They were the advance party. In the future, the Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, and the others would also enter into the Netherworld. Of course, if Ling Han's rate of cultivation was fast enough, he would be able to draw them all into the Black Tower and take them with him into the Celestial Realm. The regulations of the Celestial Realm were complete, so there was no need for them to comprehend on both ends. The group of 3 traveled, and gradually advanced deeper into the Netherworld. After entering a certain area, there were fewer and fewer cultivators from the Immortal Realm. On the contrary, there were more and more cultivators of the Netherworld. This meant that they were close to entering into the Netherworld. This was very apparent. At first, the 3 of them had looked normal, yet now there were flames of light bursting skywards from them. The farther they traveled, the more obvious these flames of light were. It was practically like a sun in the midst of darkness. Furthermore, this was unrelated to cultivation level. The flames of light Ling Han and his group exuded were of the same brightness, and the fact that Ling Han and the Empress were both in the Eternal River tier did not make any difference. People from the Immortal Realm. A Netherworld cultivator appeared, and approached them with a quick stride. Now that they were here, it was the people from the Netherworld that looked very normal instead. They no longer had that evil aura that surged up into the skies. This was a Heavenly Body tier elite. He should have just recently advanced into this level as his aura was still not very stable. He was also considerably young, a prideful expression on his face. There were pitifully few that had advanced into the Heavenly Body tier at such a young age like him. This naturally was something to be proud of. After all, the overall level of cultivation in this galaxy was not the highest level. A Heavenly Body tier absolutely was capable of being considered an elite. His eyes swept over the Empress, and a stunned expression involuntarily appeared on his face. So beautiful. Because the other party was from the Immortal Realm, he naturally did not have the slightest reservations. He directly leaped over, and stretched out a hand to grab the Empress. Ling Han and his group had all curbed their aura, and he could not estimate the cultivation levels of these 3 people, but in his opinion, what kind of elite could actually appear in this battlefield? The reason why he had come here was because he had broken through to the Heavenly Body tier, and he was here to show off a bit, and strut around in front of his rivals from the past. Otherwise, wouldn't it be like wearing richly embroidered clothes in the dark? Killing intent immediately leaked out from the Empress. There was only one man in this world that could touch her, but it was definitely not this person in front of her. Yet Ling Han moved before she did, and slapped him repeatedly with both hands. Pa 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 pa. In an instant, he had struck the other a few dozen times, and the man was completely knocked unconscious from the barrage. Let's go. There is no need to drop down to the level of this kind of person, Ling Han said with a smile. The Empress naturally listened to Ling Han. Ling Han channeled the demonic power source, and his aura immediately changed. He had actually returned to his homeland. "My great master, have you come to conquer the netherworld?" He was excited, and couldn't hold back from wanting to make threatening gestures, and become a lackey that used his powerful connection as an intimidation tactic. "Conquer your head. We are here to take refuge." Ling Han gave him a kick. "Master, who is hunting us down?" The Azura Demon Emperor immediately asked cautiously. "Just a saint," Ling Han said, playing down the level of danger they were in. "Pooh!" The Azura Demon Emperor immediately spluttered. "Saint," and he said just, "Master, you have already reached a level that even this little Azura would break my neck just to look up at you." "Let's go." Ling Han drew out the cloud-piercing shuttle, and chose a random direction. Though a saint could not easily make a prediction here, saints were still too strong. Their divine sense could wrap around a whole planet. He had no wish to be found by Hu Feng. Moreover, he was not merely here to take refuge. He also wanted to cultivate in the netherworld, so he naturally had to go to various places in the netherworld. The overall level of cultivation here was slightly lower, and they didn't even have any saints. If he stayed here, all he could do was just trample some profligate young masters. It was quite fun to do something like that occasionally, but if it was done too frequently, it would become boring. Trampling prodigies was more interesting. He did not have a clear destination either, and allowed the cloud-piercing shuttle to travel quickly in the galaxy. Actually, there was no real difference between the galaxies of the immortal realm and the netherworld. Only the regulations of the heaven and earth were different, which led to a slight variation in the cultivation world of both realms. But in truth, this was merely different means of achieving the same end. Ling Han and his group were all experiencing the regulations of the netherworld. After coming to this place, they were no longer able to draw upon the regulations that they had initially grasped. They only had useless tools and power that corresponded to their cultivation level. This was equivalent to cultivating from the very beginning again. Thankfully, the Black Tower was really a precious treasure. Whichever realm it was in, it could fit in. As long as Ling Han was willing, the regulations of the netherworld could continuously enter into the Black Tower, so it was the same as actually being in the netherworld. Ling Han and his group were all comprehending Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. They wanted to cultivate the regulations of the netherworld as soon as possible, for only then would they be able to fit in better into the netherworld. Furthermore, without the support of this kind of regulations, they would not be able to show the abilities that they should possess, either. Underneath the reincarnation tree, their rate of advancement was too fast. They improved with every instant. After all, their cultivation levels were still very high. Hu Feng was only more than a day later than them. He too arrived at the two-realm battlefield, and his brow involuntarily wrinkled in a frown. He immediately understood Ling Han's intention. The latter planned to flee into the netherworld. In that way, he would not be able to predict his whereabouts anymore, because the regulations of the heaven and earth were different. He couldn't help but smirk. This was indeed not a bad idea. However, this brat still had a link of karma with the Hu clan. This would not simply disperse just because he had entered into the netherworld. If Ling Han was a saint, and had even cultivated a certain secret technique, he would be able to see the link of karma and sever it easily. This was not any kind of impressive means in the celestial realm, but in the immortal realm? Ho ho! Moreover, Ling Han still had a very long way to go before reaching the saint tier. Otherwise, what need was there for him to run? He pondered this as he strolled slowly in the two-realm battlefield. He was following the link of karma that Ling Han had left behind. Soon after, he saw a man that had been knocked out. He stretched out his hand, and the latter immediately regained consciousness with a wave. That naturally was the unfortunate guy that Ling Han had knocked unconscious. His line of thought was still paused on the moment he had fallen unconscious. The moment he woke up, he loudly roared, "How dare you! You actually dare sneak up and attack your Lord Jia, take this!" He clearly knew that Ling Han and his group were stronger than him, but he was not afraid. That was because this was the territory of the netherworld, so how could he appear weak? How dared the trash from the immortal realm come here and act arrogant? He shot out a palm that struck towards Hu Feng. Why is it not the three people from before? Forget it, who cares? In any case, they were all people from the immortal realm, so he would beat him all the same. Hu Feng was involuntarily startled. What was going on here? Not only did a mere eternal river tier like Ling Han dare to go against him, even a heavenly body tier dared to slap him now? Did he not see that he was a saint? Though he had always liked to put on a mask of amicability, this did not mean that he really did not have the airs of a saint. Could it be that he had been in the Forbidden Land for too long, and the whole world had changed without his knowledge? Chapter 1543. A Forthright Person. Pah! Hu Feng slapped that unfortunate fool, causing the latter to spin a few circles in one spot, becoming completely dizzy. You should have seen this man. With a wave of his hand, Hu Feng used his origin power to condense into Ling Han's appearance. It was very lifelike. For a saint, this was naturally an easy trick. Describe in detail your encounter with him. Though he thought that Ling Han wanted to flee into the netherworld, it was still possible that the latter was deliberately misleading him. Thus, he absolutely had to confirm it. After all, when he entered into the netherworld, he would not be able to channel the regulations of the immortal realm, and his strength would fall greatly. It should be known that outside of regulations, a saint was not much different from an eternal river tier. Their power originated from the number of heavenly bodies they possessed. In theory, an eternal river tier could even surpass a saint in the number of heavenly bodies. Hu Feng had no choice but to be cautious. After entering into the netherworld, he was no longer a saint. Instead, he would be a high-level eternal river tier. That unfortunate guy was also secretly cursing his bad luck. What was going on here? He was an elite of the heavenly body tier here. Why was it he was no match for anyone he came up against? Was there any justice left in this world? But when he saw how Hu Feng's eyes had turned ice cold, he hurriedly related his encounter with Ling Han and his group from the very beginning to the end. Actually, this was really very simple. Hu Feng turned around to leave. That unfortunate guy was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when his whole body suddenly exploded and became innumerable pieces. He should have gone to the netherworld. Let me check the link of karma. He entered into the netherworld, his whole figure radiating flames of light like the sun. He could be seen from at least 10,000 miles away. He was too dazzling and bright. In merely a short while, a great many people had charged over, all of them looking hostile. A man of the immortal realm actually dared barge in all alone. Was he tired of life already? Hu Feng smiled slightly, his smile amiable. I am looking for a person. None should come and disturb me. Otherwise, I would not mind committing mass murder. In his eyes, whether it was the immortal realm or the netherworld, all living beings were incredibly lowly. No matter how many he killed, it was nothing to him. Insolent freak from the immortal realm, you come to our netherworld and actually still dare boast shamelessly. You are an intolerable bully. These people all moved, beginning to attack Hu Feng. Hu Feng's expression became cold. With a wave of his right hand, all of them were suddenly ground into a shower of blood. He could no longer predict Ling Han's whereabouts, but the link of karma was still present. However, after he pursued for a while, this link also snapped. No matter where you are, I will find you. Hu Feng did not rashly pursue. Otherwise, it could be an action that defeated his purpose. It would allow the distance between the two of them to become even farther. Ling Han had to think that he was unable to predict his whereabouts, yet did not know that the link of karma still existed. Hence, Ling Han would definitely be careless, and think that he had thrown him off his tail. Then when he next appeared, it would be the time for him to deliver a fatal strike. He would no longer proceed with great fanfare, but would rather quietly approach, and then deliver a strike that would kill him. However, he was also slightly anxious because a man from the immortal realm entering into the netherworld was practically a living target. He was really too obvious. Hopefully, Ling Han would not be killed by someone from the netherworld. Otherwise, he would really have no idea where he should find the Celestial King technique and the Celestial Tool. Under the reincarnation tree, Ling Han and his group had already undergone a long period of seclusion. They had tentatively grasped the regulations of the netherworld. Bloodline was one aspect of it, and physique was another, but this would only allow cultivators to stand at a higher starting point and start off with a faster dash. However, the true weapon that could allow one to ascend the path of cultivation was actually comprehension ability. At this moment, it could not be more obvious. 3 years later, Ling Han's grasp of the regulations of the netherworld had already advanced into the middle stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, and the limitless 9 Deaths formation was not affected by the regulations of the 2 realms. If this formation was activated, he could even kill an elite at the peak stage of the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. Only someone who had cultivated the pinnacle level could be a match for him. The Empress was slightly inferior, but she had also reached the early stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier. Meanwhile, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was much more inferior, and only reached the late stage of the Sun-Moon tier. Though she had gained the inheritance of 3 Saint Kings, the 3 true Phoenixes were also Saint Kings of the Immortal Realm, and were not versed in the regulations of the Netherworld. Ling Han concluded his period of cultivation, and walked out of the Black Tower. He saw that the cloud-piercing shuttle had already brought them to a completely unfamiliar area of the universe. Nearby, there was a sun that was radiating fiery flames. This was a galaxy. There were signs of life. The cloud-piercing shuttle moved again, and soon landed on a star. There was dense spiritual qi in this place, the kind that was enough to allow saints to appear. Though Empress Luan Xing and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had both tentatively grasped some regulations of the Netherworld, they both decided to earnestly cultivate inside the Black Tower. No matter what, they still had to catch up in cultivation level. Thus, Ling Han was all alone, and traveled all by himself in this completely unfamiliar world. He curbed his aura, and seemed no different from an ordinary person. However, from the fact that every step he took would let him traverse more than 1,000 miles, one would know that it was absolutely impossible that he was an ordinary person. After traveling for a while, he smelt an aroma wafting over to him. As a true glutton, he was sure that this was coming from someone who was presently roasting meat. Furthermore, the ingredients used were extremely first class. He couldn't help but change direction, and was drawn by the aroma. The source was really not very far off. Otherwise, the aroma could not have possibly wafted into his nostrils. Underneath a huge tree, there was presently a large man who was roasting meat. The large man looked very much like a savage. His upper body was bare, and his lower body only had a short animal hide wrapped around him. His arms and legs were so wide that he was practically like a wild elephant. Placed on the grill were 3 animals that looked very much like chickens. Fat was currently dripping off from them, and the sight of them was already appetizing enough. Ling Han was slightly surprised because this huge man was very strong. He was also in the Eternal River tier. Was it that the overall level of cultivation here was so high that there were many Eternal River tiers, or it just so happened that he met one of the few? Ling Han's appetite was stoked, and he unreservedly asked, "Brother, could you share one with me?" The huge man also discovered Ling Han's presence. He broke into a grin and said, "All right." Ling Han rubbed his hands together, and sat down by the fireside. Upon a closer look, he couldn't help but be even more surprised, because the wood used to start the fire was also not that ordinary. It was definitely divine wood that was above level 10. Usually, it should be used for alchemy as it could supply the powerful flames necessary, but now was actually used to roast meat. If an alchemist saw this, he would definitely scold him for being a spendthrift. Though Ling Han was an alchemist, he was even more certain that he was a qualified glutton. Thus, he did not feel the slightest bit of pity at all. Instead, he was filled with high spirits because if this needed the fire that was supplied from divine wood, would the meat that was being roasted be any ordinary kind of meat? "I am Ling Han," he said. "Go Li." The large man turned the stick that was roasting the meat in a well-practiced manner. His expression was focused, which filled Ling Han with a quiet respect. This was a true glutton. They were kindred spirits. In a short while, the roast meat was finally ready. Go Li generously gave a roast chicken, or some kind of bird, to Ling Han, and Ling Han drew out a pot of fine wine. It was brewed from the various fruits grown in the Black Tower, added with some reincarnation tree leaves, and could be considered a precious treasure in itself. Go Li was not reserved, either. He drew out a bowl, and after Ling Han filled it to the brim, he immediately took a generous gulp. He was actually not worried that Ling Han had poisoned the wine. He was honest to the point of being a little foolish. Ling Han, too, ate and drank generously. This meat was really very delicious. It was definitely a divine beast with an extremely high grade. It was filled with divine essence, and was extremely nutritious. This Go Li was really forthright. He actually shared such valuable meat with a stranger without the slightest bit of hesitation. Insolent thief, you dare to eat our green treasure chicken. Right at this moment, a young girl charged out, wielding a sword in hand with an icy expression on her pretty face. Ling Han suddenly paused. Fuck, what forthright man. This Go Li was actually a chicken thief. Chapter 1544 Chicken Thief. What? This is actually stolen property? What caused Ling Han to be stuck between laughter and tears was that Go Li actually looked incredibly furious, and loudly shouted, You brat, I was so kind to invite you to share some wine, and you actually allowed me to eat something that has been stolen. He raised the roast meat in his hand high, and looked like he was going to throw it down. Then, after some thought, he took a big bite. Immediately, grease spurted in all directions. As he chewed, he was still indistinctly muttering, I look down on you. I especially disdain you. He looked again at that girl and said, Fairy, I support you, hit him. This. Ling Han looked at Go Li. Previously, he had thought that this was a savage that had walked out from the wilderness, and had a forthright and frank character, but in this moment, he understood just how gravely wrong his impression had been. A book could not be judged by its cover. This fuck was a guy that would screw others over. The girl also paused. All of a sudden, she could not judge the situation, but when she saw Go Li was still eating ravenously, rage rose up in her heart involuntarily. Brandishing a sword, she delivered a slash. Give me back my green treasure chicken. This girl was extraordinary. As she shot out a slash, a galaxy appeared behind her. There were at least a few hundred heavenly bodies within. Medium extreme of the eternal river tier. Ling Han was surprised. It seemed like the overall level of cultivation here was not too bad. The first two people he encountered here were both in the eternal river tier. However, he hurriedly leaped away because this young girl treated him like Go Li, and both of them became the target of her attacks. Fairy, you're beating on the wrong person. This really has nothing to do with me. I only appeared at the wrong place at the wrong time. Go Li was also repeatedly dodging, but did not fight back. This was precisely being partial to her from whom they had taken from. The man was really quite gentlemanly. Ling Han was involuntarily struck speechless. This Go Li was really shameless to a whole new level. He actually lied right in his face, and did not even blush. Just surrender and be captured. The girl was exasperated as she wielded her sword in a dazzling, skillful manner. Or I will kill both of you. She was really not just saying this. Multiple demonic patterns glowed on her sword's blade, fully arousing the might within, causing her battle prowess to be uplifted to a new height. Ling Han was a little strained. His power was not inferior to her, but the gap in terms of regulations was a little too big. He had just reached the middle stage of the low extreme, and so his grasp of regulations was also limited to the early stage of the medium extreme. He did not have any more battle prowess than that. Of course, this was his battle prowess, without considering the 9 heavens flame and the limitless 9 deaths formation. His physique was also not taken into consideration. These trump cards were all unaffected by the regulations of the netherworld. Go Li saw how he was dodging and parrying the attacks with strain, and he involuntarily looked sympathetic. He said, Brother, since you can't hold on, don't force yourself. Obediently apologized to this fairy, and the fairy would definitely take into account that this is your first offense and forgive you. The girl, meanwhile, was exploding in fury. She only had a total of 5 green treasure chickens, and she had raised every single one of them with great care. Even she could not bear to eat them, yet now 3 of them had been stolen by these 2 thieves in one go, so how could she not be furious? She wanted nothing more than to tear the 2 of them into pieces. You were the one who stole it. I was just passing by, and was innocently dragged into the matter. Ling Han sighed. Go Li, though, paled in shock. Brother, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't irresponsibly speak as you wish. It was clearly you who is the chicken thief. Why do you wrong me? What animosity do you have with me? Do you have to be like this?
What animosity do you have with me, then?
Ling Han asked, shaking his head with a smile.
Though he was in a very sorry state now. He had even evaded being hunted down by a saint, so he naturally would not take a cultivator in the medium extreme of the eternal river tier to heart.
Surrender your life. When the girl saw how they were pushing the blame onto each other, she couldn't help but become even angrier. With a battle cry, an aura of ice surged from her, and the whole heaven and earth had become incredibly cold. It felt as if even divine blood would be frozen into ice. Discretion is the better part of valor, and no good man would fight with a woman.
Brother, you hold on, I will leave first.
Gou Li swayed falsely, and turned around and fled. But he had not run a few steps when he involuntarily gritted his teeth. Shaking his head, he asked, "Brother, what do you mean by running with me?" "Nothing in particular. In any case, we are both running, so we can keep each other company." Ling Han followed closely behind Gou Li. He naturally could not possibly stay there to continue being a target.
"But I do not want to be accompanied by you,"
Gou Li exclaimed, hopping mad. "Your objection is futile. Run, or she will catch up to us," Ling Han said, smiling. Because Gou Li had been stomping in anger for a while, he had surpassed him, and the girl had already caught up with them.
She slashed out with her sword and froze the area.
Gou Li quickly ran like mad. He was actually following Ling Han. It was obvious that he had the same line of thought as Ling Han. He did not want to become an unfortunate fool that would continue to be a target. His shameless thought was that if I would be sinking, I would simply sink the whole ship as well. "Brother, hold on with company, you won't be lonely," he shouted.
"Scram, I don't know you."
Ling Han waved him off. "But I know you. Ling Han, brother Ling, right?" Gou Li was still calling out from behind him.
His voice was extraordinarily loud, as if he was afraid that the young girl could not hear him clearly enough.
Fuck, this guy was definitely doing it deliberately. "You chicken thief!" Ling Han exclaimed in reprimand.
"How could such a decent man like me pilfer?"
Gou Li exclaimed resolutely, looking very righteous, while he was still eating the roast meat ravenously. He couldn't help but praise. "So delicious." "Damn it! Damn it!" The girl behind them had already gone mad with fury. She continuously brandished her sword in strikes. She wanted to apprehend both Ling Han and Gou Li to offer a sacrifice to her green treasure chickens.
Gou Li was even more infuriating.
Not only was he still eating the chicken meat, he was even spitting out the bones over his shoulder like mad, causing the girl to become even more furious. Her whole head of raven locks was already standing on ends, becoming as white as snow. "Water heaven heart!" the girl shouted. She suddenly stopped, her left hand forming a seal. Wang, all the water vapor in the heaven and earth rose, becoming multiple crystalline structures. Every crystal contained a tiny imitation of her. This was too compressed. Ling Han and Gou Li rushed forwards, and inevitably would have to crash into these crystals, and experience a sudden heavy blow right down on their heads. But just at this moment, that terrifying physique of Ling Han's showed its might. This kind of collision was completely harmless to him. He did not even have to slow his speed. Meanwhile, Gou Li was shouting loudly.
He ran madly after Ling Han as if a fire was lit under him.
They soon rushed out of the area surrounded by the water crystals, and this girl had to execute this technique from the same spot to channel this technique.
When she withdrew the technique and continued her pursuit, Ling Han and Gou Li were already an unknown distance away from her.
"Despicable thieves, I will definitely find you too and make you pay the price." The furious shout of the girl rang out behind them. That had been transmitted through divine sense. Otherwise, her voice could not possibly have caught up with Ling Han and his companion. Ling Han ran for a while longer before he finally stopped. Gou Li also stopped and panted as he said, "Brother, you are really a fast runner."
"Brother?"
Ling Han asked, smiling faintly. Gou Li quickly waved his hand. "We have been thieves together and shared the spoils. What else can we be if not brothers? I say, brother, don't look so aggrieved. I very rarely acknowledge others." Chapter 1545 Treasure Exchange. "Brother, come." Brother Li will bring you to show off and fly. Go Li seemed like he did not take the previous incident to heart, and appeared very simple-minded.
Ho ho, you're planning to screw me over again?
Ling Han asked calmly as he drew out a roast chicken and began to eat. As Go Li watched, he couldn't help but drool.
He had finished eating his 2 roast chickens, and looking at Ling Han feasting now, with his nose smelling that alluring aroma, he couldn't help but become restless and finally said, "Brother, give me a chicken leg."
Ling Han laughed loudly. He believed that a glutton could not possibly be a bad guy, but not being a bad guy definitely did not mean he was a good guy. He shook his head and retorted, "If you want to eat, go and steal it yourself." What a joke. Is Brother Li the kind of person who would do that? Go Li exclaimed righteously, but then his face became a grimace. Only 2 chickens, a cock and hen, is left behind and they can lay eggs. I can't just give up the future delicacies to satisfy a momentary greed, right? Ling Han was astounded. I didn't think that you are the kind of person to take the big picture into consideration. He deliberately emphasized the word picture, and Go Li immediately understood what he was insinuating. He couldn't help but leap up.
Brat, you are so filthy. I am not as shameless as you. King of filth. Chicken thief.
The 2 of them each gave the other a nickname, and then both of them broke into laughter. It's about time. Let's go, Go Li suddenly said.
Go where?
Ling Han asked. Aren't you here to participate in the treasure exchange? Go Li was surprised.
Oh, treasure exchange?
Ling Han felt an involuntary cheer. He still lacked a few level 13 godly metals.
As long as the divine demon sword reached level 14, he would be able to improve it by 3 levels in one go, and rush up to the height of level 17.
Saint Tool. Let's go, where is it? Go Li scratched his head. I thought you were here for this, yet you don't even know where the treasure exchange is held? Hey, it can't be that you also don't know that there are 2 mighty figures agreeing to battle this time, right?
I really don't know.
What kind of mighty figures? Ling Han asked without the slightest shame. I am really defeated by you. Go Li shook his head repeatedly.
I'll explain on the way.
The 2 of them set out, with Go Li leading the way.
Under the feet of 2 eternal river tiers, the great mountains and rivers were quickly passed as if they were simply outlines. They were progressing at an astonishingly rapid pace. As it turned out, this planet was called Cold Cloud's Planet, and belonged to the Aurora Galaxy. The Aurora Galaxy was a super-large galaxy, and very coincidentally, 2 demon masters were actually born at the same time here. They were equivalent to the saints of the immortal realm.
As the saying goes, 2 tigers cannot share one mountain. Though the 2 demon masters did not have a life-and-death feud with each other, they had always wanted to confirm who was stronger between the 2 of them. Thus, every 100,000 years, they would conduct a spar. A battle on the level of demon masters. How astonishing was this? Could everyone witness such an event at another time? Thus, this also became a distinguished gathering of the Aurora Galaxy. Every time the agreed battle was conducted, it would attract a great number of people coming to watch. Of course, demon masters would naturally be fighting in the skies. Otherwise, when they finished their battle, it would also mean that the whole galaxy could rest in peace too. Because there were too many people coming, everyone would trade the treasures that they themselves could not use. As time passed, this gradually became a distinguished gathering too. Now there was a group of young king tiers gathering in the Black Jade Mountains to participate in a treasure exchange. Ling Han nodded internally. Since they were king tiers, it should be no problem for them to produce some level 13 godly metal. Slightly less than half a day passed, and they arrived at the foot of a mountain. This was a completely black mountain peak, and was covered with black vines. The leaves had a jade-like luster, but because there were too many of them, the mountain peak looked like a piece of black jade. Filth King, follow your brother Li. These people have many rules, and if you are not strong enough, you won't be allowed to climb up at all, Go Li said. Ling Han merely smiled, and did not say anything.
Because of the regulations, he looked to only be in the middle stage of the low extreme of the Eternal River tier, and his normal battle prowess was also in the early stage of the medium extreme.
Though he had surpassed 3 stars, this was not enough in the face of king tiers. There were many people gathered at the foot of the mountain.
The majority of them were seated in a cross-legged position, and a small number were issuing challenges in the surrounding area, appearing very warlike. Seeing that Ling Han and Go Li were planning to ascend the mountain, a person immediately stepped out to stop them. Want to ascend? Do you have the kind of strength that qualifies you for that? Go Li waved his fist. You can come and try it out. All right. The person immediately rushed forwards, drew his saber and slashed out. Pang! Go Li's fist shot out, the force of his fist becoming a wild beast, and sent the person flying abruptly. With a cold flash, the saber in the person's grip was also sent flying out of his hand. After this attack, the people around them suddenly became well-behaved. Let's go, Go Li said uncaringly. Ling Han did not take it to heart either. If he exploded with his maximum battle prowess, then only those who had cultivated the pinnacle level in the Eternal River tier could be a match for him. He naturally would not take a minor character that could be defeated in a single move like this to heart. The two of them walked on the mountain path, but they had only walked 30-odd meters when they saw a person seated on a large boulder. His right hand was holding a sword scabbard, his expression icy cold. Ling Han was certain that this man was stronger than the people at the foot of the mountain. Interesting. These people knew to find their positions based on their abilities. Go Li did not say a word, and immediately rushed up and began fighting. That man was very strong, delivering a slash that stunned the skies, but compared to Go Li, he was still considerably inferior. Very soon, he was defeated, and stepped out of their way. Only then did Ling Han know that this was a very common happening in the netherworld. When there was any kind of distinguished gathering, only those top-grade individuals could participate. Those who were defeated would be distributed in the surroundings according to their abilities. If there was a newcomer, they would have to fight their way up. No wonder no one directly flew to the summit. In the netherworld, this was a rule that was common knowledge. Ling Han nodded internally. Thankfully, he had not spoken out, or others would definitely suspect that he was a country bumpkin that had popped out from some unknown corner. He didn't even know that kind of common knowledge. Every 30+ meters, there would be a person standing guard, and their abilities were getting stronger and stronger. Yet, Go Li would be stronger the stronger his opponent was. He managed to deal with all his opponents within 10 moves, and appeared to have unfathomable depths. Ling Han involuntarily laughed. What is it? Are you afraid that I would know too much about you? Go Li took a few looks at him, and then said, I don't know why, but my instincts tell me that you are not as weak as you look. In truth, I have killed a saint from the immortal realm before, Ling Han said with absolute seriousness. Pooh! Go Li suddenly spluttered out in laughter. Clapping a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, he held his middle in bouts of laughter, and looked like he was almost going to tear up from laughing so much. Not only do you have filthy thoughts, you are also quite funny. I really have killed a saint before, Ling Han emphasized. N. Go Li nodded quickly, but judging by his mad laughter, it was obvious that he thought that Ling Han was telling a cold joke. Ling Han sighed. Why did no one believe him when he was seriously telling the truth? The two of them continued their climb up the mountain. Go Li was indeed very awesome, sweeping aside all opposition they encountered. Finally, they arrived at the top of the mountain. There was a large platform here, and in the center there were 10 stone chairs, but there were only 9 people seated now. In the surroundings, there were still a great many people standing, as if they were surrounding and protecting those 9 people. Obviously, these people here had managed to fight their way up here, and were qualified to participate in the treasure exchange, but only those 9 king tiers were qualified to sit high above the rest. Brother Li, go on, Ling Han suddenly said loudly. Defeat all of them. It is time for you to show your might. Go Li's face suddenly turned green. You can't screw me over like this. Chapter 1546 Stoking the Flames. Go Li was confident in himself, and believed that he would definitely be able to reach Dao in future, and enter into the Demon Master tier that everyone dreamed of. However, he was presently only in the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier, and those seated high up on the stone chairs were either king tiers in the high extreme of the Eternal River tier or veteran elites that were in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. He was still too inexperienced now, and was not qualified to compete with these people yet. In future, I will definitely be able to sweep all of you outside. But now, I will restrain myself, he thought internally. But he had not foreseen that Ling Han would suddenly raise his voice and shout incredibly loudly. Shua, suddenly, all eyes turned towards them of course. Some of their eyes fell on Ling Han, but Goli was definitely the center of their attention. What had this to do with him? Goli grimaced internally. Previously, he had tricked Ling Han, and had initially thought they had formed a friendship from being thieves together when they had fled together. He had already put Ling Han out of his mind, but he did not think that this guy had not forgotten at all. He was screwing him over at this moment. What are you guys looking at? Don't you know that my brother Li is known as a king-tier assassin? If you continue to look, he will stomp on all of you, and you will be forced into submission. Ling Han looked completely like a lackey that was making use of his powerful connection as an intimidation tactic, and just the mere sight of him was infuriating. Is that right? A young man wearing a blue shirt walked out of the crowd. His hair was crimson red, his expression sinister, and his eyes were focused on Go Li. What are you looking at me for? Go Li chuckled and said, This brother of mine likes to boast. Everyone, you do not have to take it seriously. Just do whatever you should be doing, just ignore us. Ho ho, boasting so greatly just now, and now you're shrinking back? Another young man walked out, yet his hands were a pair of panther paws, and he was about 3 heads taller than the average person. Come, I really would like to see how this brother Li plans to stomp on all of us. A third young man leaped out. His complexion was especially pale, yet his eyes were jade green. He looked like a venomous snake. Go Li quickly waved his hand, and laughed. It was a joke, just a joke. Brother Li, are you even a man? You can tolerate that? Yet Ling Han was simply adding fuel to the fire. He was determined to start this fire at all costs. Go on, they are just 3 pests. Brother Li, you can defeat them even with only 1 hand. Is that right? These 3 people smirked coldly. In truth, they were not stupid, and knew that Ling Han was deliberately stoking the flames, but if a newcomer had come, they naturally had to estimate the latter's abilities. Come and fight me. The snake-eyed man moved first. He stretched out both arms, but it seemed as if they were boneless as they could endlessly twist and bend, which was impossible to defend against effectively. Go Li frowned, yet had no choice but to move. After all, he could not allow others to beat him, right? Ling Han hurriedly scurried off to one side. He had successfully stoked the fire, so it was naturally time for him to watch the show now. But just as he was watching with much interest, the panther paw man pointed the arrow straight at him. Brat, you are bouncing around a lot. No, just a little. Ling Han was very humble. Those who are weak are not qualified to stand on this platform. The panther paw man moved brazenly. The general atmosphere of the whole netherworld was far ruder and more unreasonable than in the immortal realm. They would come to blows at the slightest disagreement. Ling Han sighed. Stretching out the index and middle fingers of his right hand, he began to fight the other. He was using the lightning sword technique, but the lightning sword technique was based on speed, and combined with the power of lightning he had formed through observing heavenly tribulation. However, both these traits were established on the regulations of the immortal realm. Thus, its might that could be displayed was greatly weakened. Ling Han was indifferent. His opponent was only in the medium extreme of the eternal river tier, so he could simply play around with him, and use him to increase his grasp of the regulations of the netherworld. The 9 big shots on the stone chairs only cast a look at him before withdrawing their attention. This kind of battle was absolutely not worth their attention, but the time for the treasure exchange was not here yet, so they did not stop them. In any case, were cultivators not produced through continuous battles? Go Li was indeed awesome. He had dealt with the snake-eyed man in over 100 moves, but the battle between Ling Han and the panther paw man was incredibly drawn out, and also extremely confusing to the spectators. It was clear that this guy did not have a high cultivation level. He only had slightly stronger power, and looked like he would quickly lose. But as it happened, he still managed to hang on continuously, which caused the spectators to click their tongues in amazement. Have you all realized that this guy's strength seems to be slightly stronger than when he had just started? Now that you're saying it, it seems like that really is the case. Everyone turned to look at each other,
and couldn't help but look stunned.
This was too bizarre. Although the majority of king tiers were the type to use battles to develop themselves, and their abilities would improve faster the more they fought, it was nothing as exaggerated as Ling Han was now. After a battle, no matter what, one should go into seclusion for a few months or even a few years, summarize their inadequacies in the battle, and improve on that basis.
Naturally, one's abilities would improve slightly. But in Ling Han's case, whilst fighting, he was also improving on his own abilities. Just what kind of freak was this?
This kind of natural talent at cultivation was practically nature-defying. Yet it was them that were thinking too much. Ling Han's cultivation level had been in the medium extreme of the Eternal River tier in the first place, but his grasp of the regulations in the netherworld was still maintained at the low extreme. Thus, the more of a grasp he had on the regulations of the netherworld, the further his abilities would naturally improve. Fighting with the Panther Man was a process for him to quickly grasp the regulations of the netherworld. But others did not know that. After half a day had passed, Ling Han could already manage a counter for every 10 moves compared to when he initially had to stay on complete defense. Then, it slowly became that he could counterattack for every 9 moves, then 8 moves, and he was becoming stronger and stronger. This caused even those big shots seated high up to raise an eyebrow. If this guy was allowed to continuously fight on like this, would he directly fight his way all the way up to the Demon Master tier? A day later, Ling Han was no longer at a disadvantage at all. The Panther Paw Man stopped in shock. If they continued fighting, Ling Han would surpass him in strength, and just the thought of this was enough to frighten him. Ling Han was discontented. Why aren't you fighting anymore? Like hell, is there such a freak like you? The Panther Paw Man did not answer, and directly sank into the crowd. He couldn't fight him, but could still avoid him, right? Goli returned, looked at Ling Han, and then seriously stated, "You are really a strange guy. You are not ordinary, either. Even I don't know how strong you are exactly," Ling Han retorted solemnly. "Filth King." But in the next instant, Goli had dismissed all his seriousness. "Chicken thief." Ling Han was unwilling to be outdone, either. On a stone chair a big shot said, "Cough, it's about time.
Let's start exchanging treasures."
He looked to be in his 30s, and was the oldest among all those gathered here. 100 million years ago, he had already reached the consummate level, but his corresponding age was only about 30 plus, so he could be claimed to be in the prime of his youth, his vitality high. "I was recommended by all to become host, so I shall get the ball rolling," he said smilingly. Spreading out his right hand, there was a completely crimson fruit in his palm. This is the red clear fish fruit, and can allow the cultivation level to be greatly boosted for Eternal River tiers. However, its effects are extremely violent. Unless there is a demon master standing by to suppress them, only those who have reached the consummate level of the Eternal River tier will be able to bear being barraged by its medicinal effects. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but shake their heads. This requirement was really too high. Asking the help of a demon master? How many could accomplish that? Chapter 1547 Drawing Jealousy. This red clear fish fruit was really not very helpful. Those that were in true need of it did not dare eat it, and when their cultivation level reached the consummate level of the Eternal River tier, there was actually no further barrier ahead of them. If they cultivated a few tens of thousands to a few million years, they would definitely be capable of reaching the peak stage. Furthermore, when one reached that step, they would have to experience the regulations of heaven and earth. Otherwise, the number of stars could slowly be increased, but it was forever impossible for one to take the final, most crucial step and advance into the Genesis tier. Of course, if they had a demon master to support them, then that was really a true natural treasure. Those who need it, please take out a treasure to trade for it. After Guang Feichen said this, he closed his mouth, his eyes sweeping over the gathered masses. "I have a purple frost pill here, which can allow a person who cultivates an ice element cultivation technique to increase his battle prowess by a single star for a short period," someone spoke up. Guang Feichen shook his head. Firstly, he was not cultivating an ice element cultivation technique, and secondly, a natural treasure that directly increased one's cultivation level was far more valuable than a temporary burst of battle prowess. At least, only one pill was far from being enough. "I have an incomplete scroll of the life-crossing art here,"
Is Brother Guang satisfied with this? Another person spoke up.
A hint of shock appeared in Guang Feichen's expression, and he asked, "Which chapter is it?" "The middle chapter," the person answered.
Guang Feichen shook his head again. "Unfortunately, I do not need the middle chapter." But this caused everyone else to whisper among themselves. The life-crossing art was very famous in the Netherworld, and was said to have been left behind by a demon master. However, it had been lost long ago, and the presently remaining incomplete chapters were also very hard to obtain. They could not possibly obtain a complete demon master technique now, but gathering all 3 incomplete chapters would still serve the purpose of study. This was very beneficial. "Brother Guang, I have a piece of level 13 godly metal here, would you mind trading?" Another person spoke up. Guang Feichen still shook his head. He was already in the consummate level of the Eternal River tier. What need did he have for level 13 godly metal? Yet Ling Han took note of this person.
Later, if the latter took out the level 13 godly metal to trade, he was determined to obtain it. He coughed and said, "Brother Guang, I have a cup of tea here.
You can take a sip first." He drew out a teapot, and directly extracted the water vapor from the air itself, turning it directly into a pot of water. Then, he drew out a reincarnation tree leaf and placed it inside. Channeling the 9 heavens flame, the pot of water immediately boiled, causing the medicinal effects of the reincarnation tree to be brought out fully. The aroma of the tea filled the air, and just the aroma would make one feel as if they were fitting in with the great Tao. This was a leaf of the reincarnation tree. Even in the celestial realm, it was an impressive treasure.
However, because its growth was stimulated by the Black Tower, the effects naturally could not possibly compare to the ancient tree that had truly grown for 12 trillion years.
Ling Han could not bear to hand over this whole pot of tea to Guang Feichen. Instead, he drew out a cup and poured a little.
Then, he filled the cup to the brim with clear water, and only then did he push it towards Guang Feichen.
The cup streaked between the two of them, passing a great many people on its course. The other 8 big shots were all stunned, their eyes filled with envy.
Compatibility with the Tao of heaven and earth was something that could only be accomplished by saints and demon masters, and if they could enter into that state, that meant that they had touched the doorstep that led to entering into the demon master tier. Though they would still be very, very far away, they at least would have a sliver of hope, and would no longer be groping around blindly.
This tea was too awesome. It was only a single leaf, and had been diffused innumerable times. If they could *** taste it, would Genesis tier be far off from them? But they did not know that only drinking the reincarnation tea for the first time would have the best effects. In future, though it would still be helpful in comprehending Tao, it was definitely not as exaggerated as the first sip. After a very long time, Guang Feichen finally opened his eyes, and asked, "How many tea leaves are you trading?" Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Just this one pot." In other words, 1 tea leaf in exchange for a red clear fish fruit. If a great elite of the celestial realm was here, he would definitely slap Ling Han, and kill this spendthrift fool. This was practically extravagance to a terrifying extent. He was actually using a precious treasure among the celestial herbs to trade for a divine fruit. But Ling Han did not care the slightest bit. He had many reincarnation tree leaves. Furthermore, what was the use of guarding a mountain of treasure? The true path to power was using this mountain of treasure to strengthen his own abilities. Guang Feichen did not know that this was a leaf of the reincarnation tree. He paused for a while and then answered, "All right, I accept the trade." The 2 of them waved their hands. One sent out the teapot, while the other sent the red clear fish fruit over, and completed the first trade of the treasure exchange this time round.
"Next, we shall go by turns."
Guang Feichen pointed randomly at one person. "We'll start from you." Various types of treasures were taken out one after another, but Ling Han was only interested in increasing his cultivation level and level 13 godly metal, or saintly material from level 17 and upwards, but it was obvious that no one could possibly take something like that out.
That was saintly material. It was something that not even every saint might possess, so how could it possibly fall into their possession?
An Eternal River tier possessing saintly material might not be fortunate, but would instead draw a calamity onto himself. There were very few treasures that could increase cultivation level. It was possible that only big shots like Guang Feichen could possess one because it was useless even if he ingested it, so he could only use it in a trade. Others would definitely have used such treasures themselves. Ling Han completely did not fear becoming the target of others.
As long as he thought it might be of some use, he would trade, and there were some cultivation techniques of the netherworld and pill recipes among those items he traded for.
He would use reincarnation tree leaves to complete the trade. This was a treasure that no one could refuse. Thus, Ling Han also became the biggest winner in this treasure exchange, and it was unknown how many people were already targeting him. You were not a big shot, yet showed off such astonishing wealth. Wasn't that equivalent to announcing publicly that you wanted to be robbed?
Hey, if you go on like this, even I, this brotherly, will not be able to restrain myself from robbing you.
Go Li swallowed. The eyes he looked at Ling Han were the eyes of a glutton looking at a delicious feast. Ling Han smiled slightly. You can try, and we'll see who will be robbing whom.
See, he was a man of such firm principles.
When it was his turn to participate in the exchange, he directly took out 3 reincarnation tree leaves, and said that he wanted 3 pieces of level 13 godly metal, which almost caused the others to come to blows. He only wanted 3 pieces, and there were not just 3 people that had that kind of godly metal here. All of them wanted to trade with Ling Han, so naturally they were glaring at each other. Ling Han managed to successfully trade for 3 large pieces of godly metal, and was overjoyed. He immediately wanted to enter into the Black Tower so that the Divine Demon Sword could complete its upgrade, but he still suppressed the urge. In any case, he had already waited so long, so what did a few more days matter?
Damn thieves, so the 2 of you are here.
A delicate rebuke, and a young girl descended from the skies. Her right hand wielded a sword, the killing intent blazing in her expression as she glared at Ling Han and Go Li. Chapter 1548. A Demon Master, S. daughter. Their Xia was here. Ling Han and Go Li exchanged looks, and planned to slip away. Fairy Zhu, have these 2 people offended you? A big shot asked.
Though he was only in the peak stage of the high extreme of the Eternal River tier, because he was a king tier, his battle prowess could be claimed to be extraordinary, and he could lay claim to the name of a big shot.
His name was Bei Kai, and he did not belong to this galaxy.
Fairy Zhu, I will get revenge for you. Let me. There were a considerable number of people calling out in the area, all of them seeming to be close friends of this young girl.
A muscle twitched slightly in Ling Han's cheek, and he asked Go Li, Hey, whose chicken did you actually steal? This girl's background does not look to be very ordinary.
How should I know? I immediately made a move when I saw the green treasure chicken, Go Li said very innocently.
You, the 2 of you actually stole Fairy Zhu's green treasure chicken?
Someone beside them heard their words, and was immediately scared into taking a few steps back, as if determined to draw a clear dividing line between them.
Ling Han was confused and asked, So what if he stole it? Who exactly is this girl? That's right, who is she? Go Li asked. Another person by the side shook his head, and asked, You 2 actually don't even know of Fairy Zhu, Zhu Xian? Is she very famous?
Go Li murmured, and then his eyes suddenly became blank.
Hiss, I remember the Overlord Sword Demon Master's surname is also Zhu, don't tell me. That's right, Fairy Zhu is precisely the only daughter of the Overlord Sword Demon Master. The man nodded.
Fuck.
Go Li's eyes involuntarily widened. He actually stole a chicken from the daughter of a demon master. Wasn't that practically issuing a challenge to the demon master? Ling Han grinned, and clapped a hand on Go Li's shoulder. Congratulations, you are about to be hunted down by a demon master. Get lost, aren't you the same as well? Don't forget, you also had a share of the chicken meat. Go Li jumped high into the air. With their explanation, those gathered also understood. No wonder Zhu Xian was so furious. As it turned out, these 2 had been so outrageously bold to actually steal and eat the chickens that she was raising. Everyone shook their heads. She was the daughter of a demon master. If you drew her ire, you had best pray for good luck. However, in any case, they had just stolen and ate a few chickens, so they simply had to offer a humble apology. Fairy Zhu was not a petty person. Humph, kneel down and quickly apologize to Fairy Zhu. A young man stood up. Initially, Zhu Xian was noble and remote. Even if others wanted to curry her favor, they would not get the chance to. But this was a wonderful chance. If he could perform well in front of Zhu Xian, who knew, she might fall in love with him, right? Then wouldn't he become the son-in-law of a demon master? This was a great opportunity. None of your business, get lost. Gou Li was not in a good mood, and waved off the man, appearing to be very irritated. Humph, you are really arrogant. No wonder you dared to steal from Fairy Zhu. The man moved brazenly and took the initiative to attack Gou Li. He dared to step out, so he indeed had some abilities. His strength was not inferior to Gou Li, so this wouldn't only be seeking his own humiliation. The two people fought fiercely, yet it was hard to decide who was stronger. They continued to be stuck in a stalemate. Bei Kai saw a sliver of impatience in Zhu Xian's expression, and thus said, Fairy Zhu, allow me to fight on your behalf, and give these two little thieves a little punishment. Zhu Xian nodded, not taking Bei Kai's move to ingratiate himself with her to heart. Because she was the daughter of a demon master, she was used to others currying favor with her all her life. Because she was not accustomed to it, she chose to live on her own. She had not thought that she had just moved out a few years, yet she would already be robbed. Her green treasure chickens were too pitiful. In the past, even her old man drooled at the sight of them, but because she had developed affection for them, she did not allow the demon master to take a single bite. But in the end, they ended up in the stomachs of two little thieves. Bei Kai moved, suppressing with a single palm strike. Both Gou Li and his opponent paled in shock, and hurriedly separated, not daring to face this attack head-on. A king tier that had reached the peak stage of the high extreme of the eternal river tier could be called a big shot. His battle prowess was incredibly frightening. His eyes focused on Gou Li, and he attacked continuously. Because Gou Li's abilities were clearly superior to Ling Han's, as long as Gou Li was suppressed, Ling Han naturally would have no escape, either. Gou Li roared out in anger. He too was a king tier, so he naturally was unwilling to be captured and humiliated. He showed his full battle prowess, and fought Bei Kai right up to the skies. But no matter how powerful he was, there was a gap of a whole minor level between the two of them. He was definitely no match for Bei Kai. In merely over a dozen moves, he was blasted down from the skies by a palm strike. Bang, he crashed into the platform on the mountain top, and created a human-shaped pit in the platform. Ling Han walked over with a smile and said, Chicken thief, you really don't look so good now. Filth King, don't you laugh now. Later, you'll be following in my footsteps. Gou Li's physique was very strong. He actually still had the energy to speak, but his vitality had indeed greatly declined, and he appeared to be a bit weak and lacking strength. It's your turn. Bei Kai stood proudly in midair, pointing a finger right at Ling Han. Ling Han crooked his finger at him. I should give you prior warning. Later if I thrash you, you had better not break out in tears. Ha! Bei Kai smirked coldly, a hint of displeasure leaking into his expression. He especially despised those who liked to talk big. He did not say anything else, and stretched out his hand to grab Ling Han. In his opinion, he would naturally be easily grabbed with a single move. Ling Han used his index and middle fingers like a sword, and swiped out at that giant hand. Wang, under the pressure of a big shot, Ling Han suddenly looked strained. However, even if the other was a big shot, the peak stage of the high extreme of the eternal river tier was still a little inferior, and was not enough to shake his physique. The palm strike landed, and Bei Kai couldn't help but lightly exclaim in surprise. Though he had not used his full power in this strike, the other party had dispersed it a little too easily, hadn't he? The others were also surprised. Bei Kai actually did not manage to apprehend Ling Han in a single move. This was extremely inconceivable. It should be known that Bei Kai was known as a big shot. Yet Ling Han shook his head internally. Bei Kai was indeed not weak, but compared to the big shots of the Star Sand Martial Arts Academy, he was lacking. At most, he could only be considered a rank 1 king tier. Apparently, in different places, what the moniker of big shot represented was also vastly different. With a battle cry, he took the initiative to approach Bei Kai, and began a furious battle with the latter. This was an acceptable opponent. Compared to the man previously, he was considerably stronger,
and could allow him to acquire a better grasp of the regulations of the netherworld.
He was studying for practical application.
His cultivation level was already there, and he also had the support of the demonic power source, so there was no problem at all.
At the beginning, it was naturally Bei Kai who was completely suppressing Ling Han, and Ling Han could only manage to parry his attacks. In fact, he was being beaten repeatedly. However, because his physique was too strong, these attacks were completely superficial when they landed on him. However, Ling Han gradually became capable of fighting back. At first he could only counterattack once per 100 moves, then he could counterattack once per 90-odd moves, and then it became 80-odd moves.